I have nothing left but this $33. Clara's hands trembled as she stared at the crumpled bills on the counter, her last breath of hope in a world that had been suffocating her for months. Outside, the winter wind howled through Oak Haven like a warning, and inside her daughter's lungs fought for every single breath. $33. That was the barrier between Lily's next asthma attack and survival. That was all that stood between them and complete darkness. But before we dive into how this desperate moment led to 100 Hell's Angels roaring into this forgotten town 2 days later, turning everything upside down, I need you to do something. Hit that subscribe button right now. Stay with me until the very end of this story, because what happens next will shake you to your core. And drop a comment telling me what city you're watching from. I want to see just how far Clara's story travels. Trust me, you won't believe where this goes. The fluorescent lights of the Copper Creek diner buzzed like dying insects, casting a sickly yellow glow over the cracked vinyl booths and stained linoleum floor. Clara Bennett moved between tables with the mechanical precision of someone who'd learned long ago that thinking too much about your life only made the pain sharper. Her feet ached in shoes held together with duct tape, and her lower back sent jolts of fire up her spine with every step. But she kept moving because stopping meant remembering, and remembering meant breaking down right there in front of the early morning truckers who barely looked at her anyway. "Coffee's cold again, sweetheart." The trucker's voice cut through her fog. Clara turned, forcing her face into something resembling a smile, though her cheeks felt like they might crack from the effort. "I'll get you a fresh pot right away, sir." "Yeah, you do that." He didn't look up from his phone. Clara grabbed the pot from the burner, her hands moving on autopilot. 6 a.m. and she had already been here for 2 hours covering the early shift because Denise called in sick again, the third time this week. Greg Miller, the diner's owner, didn't care that Clara had been up all night with Lily listening to her daughter's chest rattle, like stones in a tin can, counting the remaining doses in the inhaler that was supposed to last another week but wouldn't make it past tomorrow. "Fresh and hot," Clara said, refilling the trucker's cup. Her voice sounded hollow even to her own ears. He grunted something that might have been thanks. She turned back toward the kitchen and nearly collided with Greg himself, his massive belly straining against a grease-stained shirt, his face already red despite the early hour. "Clara, my office, now." Her stomach dropped. "I'm in the middle of now." The other waitress, Sarah, shot her a sympathetic look as Clara followed Greg's heavy footsteps toward the back. The office was barely bigger than a closet reeking of stale cigarettes and something else Clara couldn't quite identify. Maybe just the concentrated essence of Greg's particular brand of meanness. "Shut the door." Clara obeyed, her heart hammering against her ribs. Greg didn't sit down. He stood there, arms crossed, eyes cold as January ice. "You're short on your register again." "What?" "No, I counted it 3 times last night before $12.40. "That's impossible. I always count if, You calling me a liar?" Greg stepped closer and Clara instinctively backed against the door. "Because I got the count right here and it shows you're short. Again. That's the 3rd time this month." Clara's mind raced. She knew her count had been exact. She always triple-checked because she couldn't afford any mistakes. "Greg, please. I swear I counted perfectly." "Maybe someone else." "Maybe someone else what?" "Maybe someone else is stealing from my register." "That what you're saying?" His voice rose, spittle flying. "Because if you're accusing my other employees, I'm not accusing anyone. I'm just saying there must be a mistake. The mistake is me being too soft with you." Greg grabbed a clipboard from his desk and shoved it at her. "This comes out of your paycheck, and you're going to work a double today to make up for lost time. Denise is out and I need coverage." Clara stared at the paper, the numbers blurring. A double meant 16 hours. It meant missing the only 3 hours she usually got to spend with Lily awake. It meant her feet would bleed inside these falling apart shoes, and her back would scream, and she'd go home to her daughter in the dark again, too exhausted to do anything but collapse. But it also meant she kept this job. And keeping this job meant maybe possibly if she could just hold on a little longer, she could afford Lily's inhaler refill and the electric bill that was already 2 weeks overdue. "Okay," she whispered. "What was that?" "I said, okay." Louder this time, but her voice still shook. "Good. Now get back out there. Table 6 is waiting." Clara stumbled out of the office, her vision swimming. Sarah grabbed her arm in the narrow hallway. "You all right, honey?" "I'm fine." You're not fine. You look like you're about to pass out. I just need a minute. Clara pushed past her into the bathroom, locking the door behind her. She gripped the edge of the sink, staring at her reflection in the spotted mirror. When had she gotten so old? She was 34 but looked 50. Dark circles carved deep shadows under her eyes. Her hair, which used to be a rich brown, now hung limp and lifeless around her hollow cheeks. She looked like a ghost. She thought about Lily still asleep in their trailer, her small chest rising and falling with that terrible wheezing sound. She thought about the inhaler with maybe 2 good doses left. She thought about the electric bill, the water bill, the threatening letter from the landlord about back rent. She thought about the $33 in her wallet, everything she had left in the world after paying for Lily's last doctor visit. $33. The number haunted her. A sharp knock on the door made her jump. Clara, orders are backing up. She splashed cold water on her face, took a breath that hurt her throat, and went back to work. The morning crawled by in a blur of coffee refills and breakfast orders. Her feet screamed. Her back sent lightning bolts of pain up her spine. But she kept moving because that's what you did when stopping wasn't an option. Around 11, the lunch rush started to build. The diner filled with the usual crowd, construction workers from the development going up on Route 9, retired folks with nowhere better to be, a few businessmen passing through on their way to somewhere more important than Oak Haven. Clara was wiping down table 4 when Sarah hissed her name. Clara, look. Something in Sarah's voice made Clara's skin prickle. She turned toward the windows. 5 motorcycles rumbled into the parking lot, their engines growling like caged animals. Not just any motorcycles, massive machines, chrome gleaming even under the gray sky exhaust pipes that looked like they could wake the dead. And the riders. Clara's breath caught. They were huge, not just tall, but broad-built, like men who'd spent their lives fighting gravity and winning. Black leather vests covered in patches she couldn't quite make out from this distance. Chains, boots that looked heavy enough to crack concrete. They moved with a kind of casual menace, like violence was always an option, but rarely necessary because just looking at them was usually enough. The diner went quiet, not silent, but that particular kind of quiet where everyone's trying to pretend they're not staring while absolutely staring. Greg emerged from the kitchen, his face going from red to purple. Not in my place, not today. Greg, Sarah started, I don't serve their kind here. You can't just watch me. But it was too late. The door swung open and they walked in. The first one through was the biggest, had to be 6'5", maybe 6'6", with shoulders that barely fit through the door frame. His face was weathered like old leather eyes, pale blue and utterly calm. Gray beard thick and well kept. The vest over his broad chest had patches that read things Clara couldn't quite process: skulls, wings, words in Gothic script. Behind him came 4 more, each one just as imposing. They didn't swagger or strut. They just moved with absolute certainty, like men who'd never questioned their right to exist in any space they entered. The big one, their leader, clearly scanned the room with those calm blue eyes. His gaze passed over Clara, moved on, then came back. For just a second, their eyes met, and Clara felt something shift in her chest. Not fear exactly, though, there was some of that. Something else. Recognition, maybe. Like he saw her, really saw her. Not just a tired waitress in a dying town, but an actual human being. Then his attention moved to Greg, who'd planted himself in the middle of the diner like he was defending the Alamo. We're closed, Greg announced. His voice shook slightly, betraying the fear his stance tried to hide. The big man looked around the obviously not closed diner, then back at Greg. When he spoke, his voice was surprisingly soft, almost gentle. Menu says you serve until 2 p.m. It's 11:30. I said we're closed. We just want breakfast, friend. Nothing fancy. Eggs, bacon, coffee. We'll pay and be on our way. I don't serve bikers. The temperature in the room dropped about 10 degrees. The 4 men behind the leader shifted slightly, and Clara saw the tension ripple through them like a current. But the big man held up one hand, a small gesture barely noticeable, but his men went still again immediately. That right? The big man's voice remained calm, but something had changed in it. Something hard underneath the softness. You don't serve bikers. That a new policy, or you always been discriminating against people based on how they dress? Greg's face went from purple to almost crimson. This is my establishment. I got the right to refuse service to anyone. You do. That's true. The big man nodded slowly. Though I'm curious if you refuse service to everyone wearing leather jackets or just the ones riding motorcycles. Because I see a couple folks in here wearing leather right now, and they seem to be eating just fine. A businessman in the corner booth actually got up and left, throwing cash on the table as he hurried out. Another couple followed. The exodus had begun. Clara watched it all like a bad movie she couldn't turn off. Part of her wanted to run too, but a bigger part, the part that was so tired of being afraid, so tired of watching men like Greg push people around, that part kept her feet planted. "I want you out of my diner," Greg said. "Now, before I call the sheriff." "Sheriff Dawson." The big man smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Yeah, you go ahead and call him. We'll wait." Greg pulled out his phone with shaking hands. He dialed, turned away, started speaking in a low, urgent voice. The big man walked calmly to the counter and sat down on a stool that creaked under his weight. His men followed, taking seats along the counter. Up close, Clara could see their faces more clearly. Hard faces, yes. Scarred, weathered, but not cruel. There was a difference she was learning between dangerous and mean. These men were dangerous. Greg was mean. Sarah had disappeared into the kitchen. The few remaining customers were focused intently on their plates, desperate to be invisible. That left Clara standing there with a coffee pot in her hand and 5 Hell's Angels sitting at her counter. The big man looked at her. "Coffee's still hot." Clara's mouth was dry. "Yeah, fresh pot. I'll take a cup, black." His voice was kind. Why was his voice kind? Clara had expected growling aggression threats, but he sounded like someone's grandfather asking for coffee on a Sunday morning. She poured with hands that only shook a little. The other 4 men requested coffee too, 2 black, 1 with cream, 1 with sugar. She served them all, hyper-aware of Greg pacing behind her on his phone, his voice rising as he argued with someone. "Thank you, ma'am," the big man said when she'd finished. "I'm Jim Hannon." Clara nodded but didn't give her name. Didn't seem safe somehow. "You been working here long?" Jim asked conversationally, like they were old friends catching up. 3 years. "That right, you like it?" Clara almost laughed. "Like it's a kid." Jim nodded slowly, like she'd said something profound. "That it is." Sheriff Dawson arrived 12 minutes later, his belly preceding him through the door. His face already set in that particular expression of lazy authority Clara knew too well. He'd pulled her over twice last year for a broken taillight she couldn't afford to fix, threatening to impound her car both times, before finally letting her go, with warnings she was sure he'd documented somewhere just to hold over her head later. "All right, Jim," Dawson said, not bothering with any preamble. "You know the deal. Greg don't want you here. You gotta go." Jim took a slow sip of his coffee. "We're just trying to order breakfast, Sheriff. Haven't broken any laws. You're trespassing if the property owner asked you to leave. Haven't been given a chance to order yet. How can we be trespassing if we're attempting to conduct legal business?" Dawson's face reddened. "Don't get smart with me. Wouldn't dream of it." Jim's voice remained infuriatingly calm. "Just stating facts. We came in, requested service, were refused based on, well, what would you call it? Sheriff, our appearance, our choice of transportation. Help me out here." "I don't have time for this." Dawson's hand moved to his belt, resting on his baton. "You leave now peacefully, or I start making arrests for disturbing the peace." "Haven't disturbed anything. We've been sitting here quietly, drinking coffee. This nice lady was kind enough to serve us." "You're disturbing my peace," Greg shouted from behind the counter, "and you're scaring my customers." "The ones who left did so of their own choice," Jim pointed out. "We didn't threaten anyone." This was insane. Clara watched the standoff like a tennis match, her heart pounding. Why were they pushing this? Why not just leave 5 men against a sheriff who had the whole town in his pocket? Wasn't a fight worth having over breakfast. But then she looked at Jim's face again and understood. This wasn't about breakfast. This was about principle, about not being pushed around just because you looked a certain way, about demanding the basic respect of being served in a public establishment. It was about the same thing Clara fought for every single day, the right to be treated like a human being. "Last warning," Dawson said, his hand now on his gun. "Leave now or I start making calls for backup." Jim set down his coffee cup with a soft click. For the first time, Clara saw something other than calm in his expression. Not anger exactly, disappointment maybe, like he'd hoped for better and wasn't surprised to be let down. "All right, Sheriff, we'll go." He stood and his men stood with him. "But for the record, this is discrimination and..." Save it for someone who cares, Dawson interrupted. Jim nodded slowly. He pulled out his wallet, thick leather worn smooth, and extracted a credit card, holding it out to Greg. For the coffee. Greg's face twisted into something ugly and triumphant. Don't take credit cards. Cash only. Since when? Clara heard herself say. The words were out before she could stop them. Everyone turned to look at her. What? Greg's eyes narrowed dangerously. You took a credit card from the Johnson party this morning. I saw you run it yourself. The silence that followed was absolute. Clara's heart hammered so hard she thought everyone must be able to hear it. What had she done? What had she just done? Greg's face went from red to almost white. You're mistaken. I'm not. Table 7, 8:15 a.m. Mrs. Johnson paid with a Visa. You ran it at the register. You must be confused. I'm not confused. Clara's voice shook, but she kept going. She'd already jumped off the cliff. Might as well see how far she could fall. You don't want to take their card because they're bikers. That's the only reason. Clara, Greg's voice dropped to a dangerous whisper. Stop talking. But Jim was looking at her with something like respect now, and somehow that made her braver than she'd been in years. It's discrimination, she said. Like he said, and it's wrong. You're fired, Greg said flatly. The words hit her like a physical blow. Fired. The room spun. No job meant no money, meant no inhaler, meant Lily couldn't breathe, meant... Now hold on, Jim started, but Clara was already backing away, the full weight of what she'd done crashing down on her. Lily. God, what about Lily? Get out of my diner. Greg shouted at her. And don't come back. Clara's hands fumbled with her apron strings. Her fingers wouldn't work right. Everything felt distant and strange, like she was underwater. Sarah rushed out from the kitchen. Greg, you can't just... The hell I can't. She's been stealing from the register, and now she's causing trouble with customers. I never stole anything. Clara's voice broke. That's not what the counts say. Jim stepped forward. Sir, maybe if we all just... You shut your mouth. Greg warbled on him. This is your fault coming in here causing problems. We just wanted breakfast, Jim said quietly. Well, you're not getting it. Not here, not ever. Sheriff, get them out. Dawson moved forward, hand still on his gun. Time to go, boys. Jim looked at Clara one more time. She saw him calculate something, saw the wheels turning. Then he reached into his wallet again and pulled out bills. Lots of them. He held them out to Greg. For the coffee, he said. Cash like you wanted. Greg snatched the money, counted it quickly. This is too much. Keep the change. Jim turned to leave his men following, but as he passed Clara, he paused. Sorry about your job, ma'am. That wasn't right. Clara couldn't speak. Her throat had closed up completely. And then they were gone, the rumble of their engines fading into the distance, and she was standing in the Copper Creek Diner, the place she'd worked for 3 years, the place she'd sacrificed her feet and her back and her time with her daughter for, and she didn't work there anymore. She didn't work anywhere anymore. Clara, Sarah's hand on her arm. Come on, honey, let's get your things. Clara let herself be led to the break room in a daze. Her locker was small, barely big enough for her purse and an extra pair of socks. She gathered her belongings like she was moving through molasses. This isn't fair, Sarah whispered. You were just telling the truth. Truth doesn't pay bills, Clara heard herself say. She walked out through the back door, Balfour unable to face the diner floor again. The alley smelled like old grease and rot. Her car was parked at the far end, a 15-year-old Honda with rust eating through the wheel wells and a passenger door that didn't open from the outside. She sat in the driver's seat and stared at the steering wheel. Fired. The word echoed in her head like a death sentence. Her phone buzzed. A text from Mrs. Chen, the elderly neighbor who watched Lily in the mornings. Lily needs her inhaler. Can't find it. Clara's hand started shaking. The inhaler was in her purse. She'd taken it with her because there were only 2 doses left and she didn't trust leaving it in the trailer. But Lily needed it now, and Mrs. Chen was texting, which meant Lily was having trouble breathing, which meant Clara started the car and drove faster than she should have, her mind racing. She'd give Lily the dose. That would leave one. 1 dose left and no job and no way to refill the prescription without money. $33. That's what she had. The inhaler refill cost $45. She pulled up to the trailer park's Star View Mobile Estates, though you couldn't see any stars through the light pollution, and there was nothing estate-like about it. just rows of aging trailers sinking slowly into the red clay dreams that had rusted out like the cars parked on blocks in most of the yards. Mrs. Chen met her at the door, worry creasing her already wrinkled face. "She's having a hard time, Clara. I'm sorry I looked everywhere." "It's okay, I have it." Clara rushed past her into the trailer. Lily was sitting on the worn couch, her small hands pressed to her chest, on her face pale and her lips tinged with blue. 8 years old and already too familiar with the feeling of drowning in air. "Mama," she wheezed. "I'm here, baby. I'm here." Clara knelt in front of her daughter, shaking the inhaler, checking the counter. "One dose left after this." She held it to Lily's lips. "Big breath, okay, just like we practiced." Lily tried, the inhaler hissed. Her daughter sucked in the medication with desperate hunger. Held it, released it slowly. They waited together, Clara counting seconds, watching for the color to return to Lily's face, for her breathing to ease. Slowly, too slowly, but it always felt too slow. Lily's breathing smoothed out. The blue faded from her lips. Her small body relaxed slightly. "Better," Clara whispered. Lily nodded, tears on her cheeks. "You're okay. You're okay, baby." Clara pulled her daughter close, feeling the rabbit-fast heartbeat against her own chest. "You're okay." Mrs. Chen hovered in the doorway. "I'm so sorry, Clara. I didn't mean to." "It's not your fault." Clara looked up at the old woman who'd been so kind, watching Lily for almost nothing, because she understood what it meant to be desperate. "Thank you for watching her." "Of course. Anytime." Mrs. Chen paused. "You look tired, dear. Are you all right?" Clara almost laughed. "All right, what did that even mean anymore?" "I'm fine," she lied. "Just a long morning." After Mrs. Chen left, Clara sat with Lily on the couch, her daughter curled against her side, breathing more easily now, but still fragile, still. One attack away from the emergency room they couldn't afford. "Mama," Lily's voice was small. "Are you No, baby. Why would I be sad?" "You look sad." Clara kissed the top of her daughter's head. "I'm not sad. I'm just tired." "Me too." They sat there together as the afternoon light slanted through the trailer's small windows, and Clara tried not to think about the inhaler with one dose left, or the bills piling up on the counter, or the job she just lost because she dared to tell the truth. She tried not to think about $33 and all the impossibilities it represented. She tried not to think about anything at all except the weight of her daughter against her side and the sound of her breathing, easier now, better now, but for how long? That night, after Lily was asleep, Clara sat at the kitchen table and stared at the bills spread out before her. Electric, $127 past due, water, $43, rent, $600 already 2 weeks late, with a notice threatening eviction if not paid within 5 days. And the prescription, she'd called the pharmacy, begging for any kind of discount, any kind of help. The pharmacist, sympathetic but firm, had explained that the insurance wouldn't cover another refill for 2 more weeks, and the cash price was $45. Clara had $33. She could pay the water bill and have nothing left for food. Or she could save it for the inhaler and let them shut off the water. Or she could try to pay something toward the rent and hope the landlord showed mercy, though mercy wasn't something she'd seen much of lately. She thought about Greg's face when he'd fired her. She thought about Sheriff Dawson's hand on his gun. She thought about Jim Hannon's pale blue eyes and the way he'd apologized for something that wasn't his fault. She thought about the truth and what it could come. Around midnight, she finally went to bed, but sleep was impossible. She lay there in the dark, listening to Lily's breathing from the other room, counting the breaths like rosary beads, praying each one wouldn't be the last easy one. Somewhere around 3 a.m., she heard motorcycles in the distance. The sound made her think of Jim, and his men wondered where they'd gone, if they'd found a place to eat, if they were even still in Oak Haven, or if they'd moved on to somewhere more welcoming. She wondered if she'd ever see them again. She wondered if it mattered. The next morning, Clara woke to Lily's coughing. She rushed to her daughter's room, inhaler in hand, but Lily waved her away. "I'm okay, Mama. Just tickle in my throat." But Clara could hear the wheeze underneath the words. 1 dose left. They had 1 dose left and no job and no way forward that didn't involve choosing which catastrophe to face first. She made Lily breakfast, the last of the cereal, watered-down milk, because she'd stretched it as far as it would go and tried to smile like everything was fine. "Mama, why aren't you getting ready for work?" Clara's smile faltered. "I'm not working today, baby." "Why not?" I'm taking a day off." Lily looked at her with those 2 knowing eyes. "Did something bad happen?" Nothing for you to worry about. But you look worried. Clara knelt down next to her daughter's chair. I'm always going to figure things out, okay? That's my job. Your job is just to be a kid and not worry about grown-up stuff. Lily hugged her small arms fierce around Clara's neck. I love you, Mama. I love you too, baby. More than anything in the whole world. After Lily finished breakfast, Clara called every diner, restaurant, and cafe within 20 miles. Most didn't answer. The ones that did weren't hiring or had already heard from Greg about the troublemaker he'd had to fire. Word traveled fast in Oak Haven. By noon, Clara had exhausted every option she could think of. She sat in the trailer, staring at her phone, trying to decide if pride was something you could afford when your daughter needed to breathe. She called her mother. 3 rings, 4, then, hello, Mom, it's Clara. A pause. Clara could hear the television in the background, one of those talk shows her mother loved. What do you want, Clara? I need help. Don't we all? Mom, please. I lost my job and Lily needs her medication and I just need... How much? Clara's throat tightened. $45, just enough for her inhaler. I'll pay you back as soon as... I don't have $45 to lend you, Clara. I told you when you decided to keep that baby that you were on your own. I told you it would be hard. I know you did, but nothing. You made your choices. Live with them. The line went dead. Clara sat there holding the phone, feeling more alone than she'd ever felt in her life. No job, no family, no options. Just $33 and a daughter who needed $45 worth of air. She thought about the pawn shop on Route 9. She had a necklace, the only thing her grandmother had left her, a small silver cross on a delicate chain. Maybe it would be enough. Maybe she could. Her phone rang. Unknown number. Hello. Clara Bennett. A woman's voice, professional and clipped. Yes. This is Jennifer from Oak Haven Elementary. There's been an incident with Lily. Clara's heart stopped. What kind of incident? She had an asthma attack during recess. We had to call an ambulance. The room tilted. Where is she, Boom? They're taking her to County General. You should meet them there. Clara was already moving, grabbing her keys, her purse, running for the car. The drive to the hospital was a blur of terror and traffic lights that seemed designed specifically to torture her. She ran every yellow, praying no cops were watching because she couldn't afford to stop, couldn't afford anything but getting to her daughter. County General's emergency room was chaos as always. Clara pushed through to the desk, gasping out Lily's name, and the nurse led her back to a curtained area where her daughter lay on a bed that was too big for her, an oxygen mask covering her small face, her eyes wide and scared. Mama, I'm here, baby, I'm here. Clara grabbed Lily's hand, held tight. You're okay, you're going to be okay. A doctor appeared, young, tired, kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. Ms. Bennett, I'm Dr. Martinez. Lily's stable now, but she gave us quite a scare. When was the last time she had a rescue inhaler? This morning? Yesterday morning. The dose before that. Dr. Martinez's expression shifted to something like concern mixed with judgment. She should be taking her maintenance inhaler twice daily and the rescue inhaler as needed. Her chart shows. I know what her chart shows. Clara's voice came out harder than she meant it to. I know what she needs. I can't afford the refill right now. The silence that followed was heavy. I see. Dr. Martinez made a note on her clipboard. We can give her a treatment here and send her home with samples of the rescue inhaler. But Ms. Bennett, this is serious. Without her maintenance medication, these attacks will keep happening. Eventually, I know, Clara interrupted. She couldn't hear the rest. Couldn't hear about eventually and what it meant. I'm working on it. But she wasn't working on anything. She had no plan, no job, nothing but $33 and growing desperation. They kept Lily for observation for 3 hours. The hospital wanted to admit her overnight, but Clara knew what that would cost, knew the bills that would come, bills she'd never be able to pay. She signed forms releasing them from liability and took her daughter home with 3 sample inhalers that might last a week if they were lucky. It was almost 6 p.m. when they got back to the trailer. Lily was exhausted, falling asleep almost immediately. Clara tucked her in, kissed her forehead, and went back to the kitchen to stare at the bills again, like maybe they'd changed if she looked at them hard enough. They hadn't. She picked up the $33 and counted it again. Still 33. Still not enough for anything that mattered. The knock on the door made her jump. It was past 7. Nobody knocked on her door past 7. Clara approached cautiously, peering through the peephole. A man stood on her small porch. Not one of the bikers. This guy was wearing khakis and a polo shirt, holding a clipboard. He looked official and bored in equal measure. Clara opened the door a crack, keeping the chain on. Yes, Clara Bennett. Who's asking? I'm from Credence Property Management. Hear about the overdue rent. He consulted his clipboard. You're 14 days past due. Need payment in full by end of business tomorrow, or we start eviction proceedings. Clara's stomach dropped. Tomorrow, the notice said I had 5 days. That notice was from 5 days ago, ma'am. Had it been, time had become meaningless, all the days blurring together. Maybe it had been 5 days. Maybe she'd lost track completely. I need more time, Clara said. I just lost my job, but I'm looking for another one, and I'm sorry, ma'am, but the policy is clear. Payment by tomorrow or eviction starts Friday. Please, I have a daughter. She's sick. We don't have anywhere else to go. The man's expression softened slightly, but his voice remained firm. I understand this is difficult, but I have my orders. Payment by tomorrow, 5 p.m. Have a good evening. He walked away, and Clara stood there in the doorway, feeling the world collapse around her like a house of cards in a hurricane. Tomorrow. She closed the door and slid down it, sitting on the floor, her head in her hands. Tomorrow. How was she supposed to come up with $600 by tomorrow? She couldn't even come up with $45 for an inhaler. She couldn't come up with money for food, for gas, for anything. She sat there as the sun set and the trailer grew dark around her. And for the first time in 8 years, 8 years of fighting and scraping and refusing to give up, Clara Bennett let herself cry. Not the quiet tears she sometimes shed late at night when Lily was asleep. Real crying, sobbing, the kind that came from somewhere deep and broken, the kind that acknowledged just how completely screwed she was. She cried for her daughter who couldn't breathe. She cried for the job she'd lost for telling the truth. She cried for the grandmother's necklace she'd have to pawn. She cried for the trailer she was about to lose. She cried for every choice that had led her here, and every choice that hadn't been a choice at all, but just survival. She cried until she had nothing left. And then, because she was a mother, and mothers don't get the luxury of staying broken, she got up. She washed her face. She checked on Lily, who was sleeping peacefully, her breathing easy for now, thanks to the hospital treatment. Clara went back to the kitchen table and picked up the $33 one more time. Tomorrow, she'd pawn the necklace. Maybe it would bring $50, maybe $70 if she was lucky. Add that to the 33 and she'd have maybe 100 total. Still nowhere near 600, but enough for the inhaler and a few days of food. Enough to keep fighting for just a little longer. She thought about Jim Hannon's calm blue eyes and his quiet apology. She thought about how he'd stood up for what was right, even knowing it wouldn't matter. She thought about truth and the cost of it. She thought about tomorrow and the day after that, and all the impossible days stretching out ahead. And somewhere in the distance, so faint she might have imagined it, Clara heard the rumble of motorcycles. But it was probably just her imagination. Probably. Clara woke the next morning to the sound of Lily coughing again. She was at her daughter's bedside before her eyes were fully open, the sample inhaler already in her hand. Lily took the dose without protest, her small body shaking with the effort of breathing. Better, Clara whispered. Lily nodded, but her eyes looked tired. Too tired for an 8-year-old. Clara checked the inhaler. 2 doses left in this one. She had 2 more samples from the hospital. That meant maybe 4 days if Lily's breathing stayed stable. 4 days to figure out everything else. She made breakfast from what little they had left, toast with the last scraping of peanut butter. Lily ate slowly, and Clara pretended not to notice how her daughter kept touching her chest, monitoring her own breathing, like she'd been trained to do since she was 4 years old. Mama, do I have to go to school today? You want to stay home? I'm tired. Clara felt her heart crack a little more. Okay, baby, you can stay home. We'll have a quiet day together. Except quiet wasn't what she needed. She needed to be out finding a job, pawning the necklace, figuring out how to get $600 by 5 p.m. But Lily's face was so pale and her breathing was still wheezy despite the medication, and Clara couldn't bring herself to leave her daughter with Mrs. Chen again so soon after yesterday's scare. After Lily settled on the couch with an old coloring book, Clara called the landlord's office. A woman answered on the 3rd ring, her voice already bored. Credence Property Management. Hi, this is Clara Bennett from Starview Mobile Estates Unit 42. I wanted to talk to someone about the rent situation. Are you calling with payment? Not exactly. I wanted to see if we could work out some kind of payment plan. I lost my job yesterday, but I'm actively looking for another one. And Ms. Bennett, our policy is very clear. Payment in full by 5 p.m. today or eviction proceedings begin tomorrow. I understand that, but I have a sick daughter and I just need a little more time. I'm sorry, but I can't help you. Policy is policy. Can I speak to a manager? Someone who can make an exception. The woman sighed like Clara had asked her to move a mountain. Hold, please. Terrible hold music filled Clara's ear. She watched Lily coloring her small hand, moving the crayon carefully across the page, trying to stay inside the lines even though she was clearly exhausted. 3 minutes passed. 5. Clara was about to hang up when a man's voice came on the line. This is Dan Morrison. I understand you're requesting an extension on your rent. Yes, sir. I lost my job yesterday, but I'm looking for another one. I just need maybe a week to. We don't do extensions, Ms. Bennett. You signed a lease. The lease has terms. I know that, but my daughter is sick, and we don't have anywhere else to go. That's unfortunate, but it's not our problem. You have until 5 p.m. today. After that, we file eviction papers, and you'll have 72 hours to vacate. Clara's grip on the phone tightened. There has to be something you can do, some kind of hardship consideration. There isn't. 5 p.m., Ms. Bennett. Have a good day. The line went dead. Clara stood there, holding the phone, feeling rage and helplessness war inside her chest. Policy, terms, like she and Lily were just numbers on a spreadsheet instead of human beings trying to survive. She thought about calling her mother again, but she already knew how that would end. She thought about the church on Main Street, but they'd told her last time that their benevolence fund was tapped out and she should try the county assistance office. She thought about the county assistance office, but the wait list for emergency housing was 6 months long, and they needed proof of income to qualify for most programs, and she didn't have income anymore. She thought about the $33 in her wallet and wanted to scream. Instead, she grabbed her grandmother's necklace from the small jewelry box on her dresser. The silver felt cold in her palm. She remembered her grandmother fastening it around her neck on her 16th birthday, remembered the weight of it and what it represented, faith, family, legacy. All the things Clara had tried so hard to hold on to and kept losing piece by piece. I'll be right back, she told Lily. Mrs. Chen is going to sit with you for just a little bit, okay? Where are you going? I have to run an errand, I won't be long. Lily looked at her with those knowing eyes again. You're going to fix things. I'm going to try baby. Mrs. Chen arrived within minutes, settling into the chair beside Lily with her knitting. Clara kissed her daughter's forehead and headed out to her car. The pawn shop on Route 9 was a squat building with barred windows and a flickering neon sign that read, Cash for Gold. Clara had driven past it 100 times, always promising herself she'd never be desperate enough to walk through those doors. Promises were easy to break when your daughter couldn't breathe. Inside the shop smelled like dust and desperation. Glass cases lined the walls filled with other people's treasures turned into last resorts. Wedding rings, guitars, cameras, tools. A man behind the counter looked up as she entered. He was maybe 60 with tired eyes and yellowed fingers that suggested a lifetime of cigarettes. Help you, Clara pulled out the necklace and laid it on the counter between them. How much can you give me for this? The man picked it up, examined it through a jeweler's loupe, weighed it on a small scale. Clara watched his face for any sign of what he was thinking, but he gave nothing away. Sterling silver, he said finally. Decent craftsmanship. I can give you $20. Clara felt like he'd punched her. 20, it's worth at least 100. To you, maybe. To me, it's scrap silver. 20 is my offer. I need more than that. I need at least 50. The man shrugged. Can't help you. 20 or nothing. Clara stared at the necklace, her grandmother's voice echoing in her memory. Keep this close to your heart, Clara. It'll protect you. Except it hadn't protected her from anything. Not from her husband leaving. Not from poverty. Not from watching her daughter struggle to breathe. Fine, she whispered. 20. The man counted out the bills and slid them across the counter. Clara took them, left the necklace behind, and walked out feeling like she'd just sold off another piece of herself. $20? Add that to her 33, and she had 53 total. Enough for the inhaler with $8 left over. Enough for nothing else that mattered. She sat in her car in the parking lot and did the math again, hoping it would somehow change. Rent 600, what she had 53. Difference impossible. Her phone buzzed. A text from Sarah. Greg is telling everyone you stole from the register. I told him that's BS, but it thought you should know. Clara's hands started shaking. Not only had he fired her now, he was destroying what was left of her reputation. Now she'd never get another job in this town. She typed back, "Thanks for letting me know." Another text came through almost immediately. "I'm looking for the receipts from that day. I know you didn't take anything. I'll prove it." Clara wanted to tell her not to bother, that truth didn't matter when the person with power decided to lie. But Sarah was trying to help, and Clara couldn't afford to push away the few people who still cared. "Thank you," she typed. "Be careful. Don't lose your job over this." Some things are worth losing a job over. Clara thought about yesterday, about standing up for Jim and his men, about telling the truth even when it cost her everything. Maybe Sarah was right. Maybe some things were worth it. But worth and afford were two different things entirely. She drove to the pharmacy, filled Lily's prescription with 45 of her $53, and pocketed the change. $8. That's what she had left in the world. $8 and 4 hours until the eviction deadline. When she got back to the trailer, Mrs. Chen met her at the door with worry creasing her face deeper than usual. "Clara, there are men here. They say they need to talk to you." Clara's heart dropped. "What men?" The landlord. "No, they're well. You should see for yourself." Clara stepped inside and froze. Jim Hannon sat on her couch, his large frame making the furniture look like it belonged in a dollhouse. Three of his men stood near the door, looking uncomfortable in the small space, but somehow less threatening than they had in the diner. They'd removed their sunglasses, and Clara could see their faces clearly now, hard, but not cruel, dangerous, but not mean. Lily was curled in the corner of the couch, staring at Jim with wide eyes, but not scared. More curious than anything. "Ms. Bennett," Jim stood as she entered, his voice carrying that same gentle quality that seemed so at odds with his appearance. "Sorry to intrude. We need to talk to you." Clara found her voice, though it came out higher than normal. "How did you find me?" "Small town, asked around." He gestured to the couch. "Mind if we sit?" "I think you already are sitting." A small smile crossed his weathered face. "Fair point. We won't take much of your time. We heard what happened yesterday, about you losing your job." Clara's defenses went up immediately. "Who told you that?" "The waitress, Sarah. She found us at the motel this morning, told us you got fired for standing up for us and that the owner is spreading lies about you stealing. It's not your problem." "Maybe not Astavidin," Jim agreed, "but we don't like debts, and we sure as hell don't like watching good people get crushed for doing the right thing." One of the other men spoke up, the one with the scar across his cheek and the deep voice. "We also heard about your daughter, about her being in the hospital yesterday." Clara instinctively moved toward Lily. "You need to leave, now." "We're not here to cause trouble," Jim said quickly, raising his hands in a peaceful gesture. "Just the opposite. We want to help." "I don't need your help." "Respectfully, ma'am, I think you do." Jim pulled an envelope from his vest pocket. Thick, white, slightly bent. He held it out to her. Clara didn't take it. "What is that? Open it and see." "I don't want your money." "It's not our money, it's yours. You paid for our coffee, remember. We're just returning the favor." "Coffee was $6. You already gave Greg cash for it." Jim's smile widened slightly. "Yeah, well, we felt bad about the inconvenience. Consider it a tip." Clara still didn't take the envelope. Every instinct screamed at her that there had to be a catch, had to be strings attached. Nobody gave away money for free. Nobody helped strangers without wanting something in return. "What do you want?" she asked flatly. "Nothing." Jim's expression turned serious. "I know that's hard to believe, but we ride for a lot of reasons, and one of them is because the world's got enough people taking advantage of folks who can't fight back. We try to balance the scales a little when we can." "I don't understand." "You don't have to. Just take the envelope." Clara looked at Lily, who was watching the exchange with quiet intensity. She looked at Jim's calm blue eyes. She looked at the envelope. Slowly, she reached out and took it. It was heavy, heavier than she expected. "Go on," Jim encouraged. "Open it." Clara's fingers trembled as she undid the clasp. Inside was money. A lot of money. Bills stacked neatly held together with a rubber band. She pulled them out and counted with growing disbelief. Hundreds, all hundreds, 33 of them, $3,300. The room spun. Clara sat down hard on the nearest chair, the money clutched in her shaking hands. I can't. You can and you will, Jim said firmly. That's from all of us. Every man in our charter heard what you did and what it cost you. We passed the hat around. That's what came out. But this is too much. It's what we decided you deserved. You stood up when nobody else would. You told the truth when it was easier to stay quiet. You sacrificed your job for people you didn't even know. Jim leaned forward slightly. That kind of character is rare, Ms. Bennett. It should be rewarded, not punished. Clara couldn't stop the tears. They came hot and fast, blurring her vision, choking her throat. I don't know what to say. Don't say anything. Just take care of your daughter. Pay your bills. Get yourself back on your feet. Lily slid off the couch and came to Clara, wrapping her small arms around her mother's shoulders. Don't cry, Mama. I'm okay, baby. I'm better than okay. Clara pulled Lily close, the money still clutched in one hand, her daughter held tight with the other. Jim stood and his men moved toward the door. We'll get out of your hair now. You've got things to take care of. Wait, Clara called out, wiping her eyes. I need to know your full name, all of your names, so I can pay you back. No payback necessary, Jim said. But if you really want to know, it's James Robert Hannon. These are my brothers, Cole Marcus and Tommy. The three men nodded in turn. Thank you, Clara managed. I don't know how to thank you enough. You already did, yesterday at the diner. Jim paused at the door. One more thing. We'll be around town for a few more days. You have any more trouble with that landlord or that sheriff or anyone else you call this number? He handed her a card with just a phone number printed on it. Day or night, we look after our own. I'm not one of your own. You are now. You stood with us when it mattered. That makes you family. They left as quietly as they had arrived, the rumble of their motorcycles fading into the distance. Clara sat there holding $3,300 and trying to process what had just happened. Mrs. Chen came out from the kitchen where she'd been hiding. Clara, dear, are you all right? I think so. I think I'm actually all right for the first time in months. She counted the money again to make sure it was real. It was. She could pay the rent with enough left over for bills. Food, gas, Lily's medications. She could breathe. For the first time in forever, she could actually breathe. Mama, Lily tugged on her sleeve. Are those the bad men everyone talks about? Clara thought about that, about the stories she'd heard her whole life about bikers, criminals, thugs, dangerous people to be avoided. About Jim's gentle voice and calm eyes. About $3,300 given freely with no strings attached. No babies, she said softly. Those are good men who dress like bad men. There's a difference. She called the landlord's office back. The same bored woman answered. Credence Property Management. This is Clara Bennett. I'm calling to arrange payment for my rent. Will you be bringing cash or a money order? Cash. I'll be there in an hour. Clara hung up before the woman could respond. She counted out $600 from the stack, sealed it in an envelope, and drove to the property management office, with Lily in the back seat, still tired but smiling. The office was in a strip mall between a nail salon and a tax preparation service. Clara walked in with her head high and her envelope ready. Dan Morrison came out of his office looking surprised to see her. Ms. Bennett, I didn't expect rent, $600, cash. Clara placed the envelope on the counter with perhaps more force than necessary. Count it, it's all there. Morrison opened the envelope and counted slowly, his expression shifting from surprise to something that might have been disappointment, like he'd been looking forward to evicting her. It's all here, he admitted finally. I'll update your account. I want a receipt, a detailed receipt showing the payment and that my account is current. Of course. He printed out the receipt and handed it to her. Clara took it, folded it carefully, and put it in her purse. Thank you for your patience, she said with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. As she turned to leave, Morrison called out, Ms. Bennett, how did you come up with the money so fast? Yesterday you said you didn't have it. Clara looked back at him. I found help from people who actually care about other people. You should try it sometime. She walked out feeling 10 feet tall. Next stop was the grocery store. Clara filled a cart with actual food, fresh vegetables, meat bread that wasn't day-old milk, cereal snacks for Lily. At the register, she paid cash and didn't even flinch at the total. She had money, real money, enough to last weeks if she was careful. On the way home, she stopped at the cellular store and paid her phone bill that had been threatening disconnection. She stopped at the utility company and paid the electric and water bills in full. She stopped at the bank and opened a savings account with $500 in emergency fund for the next time life tried to knock her down. By the time they got back to the trailer, Clara felt lighter than she had in years. She and Lily unloaded the groceries together, filling the cabinets and refrigerator until they actually looked full for the first time since Clara could remember. "Mama, we're rich," Lily exclaimed, staring at the full fridge. Clara laughed. "We're not rich, baby. We're just okay. And okay feels pretty good right now." That night, Clara made a real dinner: chicken, rice, vegetables, everything Lily needed to be healthy and strong. They ate together at the small table, and Lily actually finished her entire plate without Clara having to encourage her. After dinner, Clara gave Lily her medications, both the rescue inhaler and the maintenance inhaler she'd been able to refill, and put her daughter to bed with a full stomach and easy breathing. She sat in the living room afterward, the remaining money spread out on the coffee table. After all the bills and expenses, she had just over $1,700 left. It felt like a fortune. It felt like breathing room. It felt like hope. Her phone rang. Sarah. "Clara? Oh my God, I heard you paid your rent. How did you?" "Some people helped me out." "The bikers, those guys from yesterday." "Yeah." "That's incredible. That's Clara. I found something. The receipt logs from the register. I went through every single transaction from the day Greg said you were short, and guess what? The count was perfect. You weren't short at all." Clara felt her anger resurge. "So he lied." "He absolutely lied. I have proof right here. Dated receipts, transaction, records, everything." "What are you going to do with it?" "I'm going to show it to him. Make him admit he was wrong." "Sarah, don't. He'll just fire you too." "Let him try. I'm documenting everything. If he fires me for exposing his lie, that's wrongful termination." Sarah paused. "You want your job back?" "Did she?" Clara thought about the Copper Creek diner, about Greg's red face and grabbing hands, about the grease smell and the aching feet and the customers who treated her like furniture. Did she want to go back to that? "No," she said firmly. "I don't want it back, but I want everyone to know the truth." "Then that's what we'll do. I'm posting these receipts online, Facebook, everywhere. This whole town is going to know what kind of man Greg Miller really is." After they hung up, Clara sat in the quiet trailer and thought about truth and lies, about power and justice, about the cost of standing up and the price of staying silent. She thought about Jim Hannon and his men riding into town like some kind of outlaw angels, turning her life around with one envelope full of cash and no expectations of anything in return. She thought about tomorrow and the day after that, and for the first time in longer than she could remember, tomorrow didn't look like a wall she had to climb, but a door she could actually walk through. Clara fell asleep that night with money in the bank, food in the fridge, and her daughter breathing easy in the next room. She fell asleep feeling like maybe, just maybe, the worst was finally over. She had no idea the real storm was just beginning. The next morning started normally enough. Clara made breakfast, actual breakfast, with eggs and toast and orange juice, and Lily ate with enthusiasm, her color better, her breathing steady. "Can I go to school today, Mama?" "You feel up to it?" "Yeah, I feel good." Clara studied her daughter's face, looking for signs of struggle, but Lily seemed genuinely better. The medications were working, the stress was lifting. Maybe things really were turning around. "Okay, baby, let's get you ready." She drove Lily to school and walked her inside, something she hadn't been able to do in weeks because she'd always been rushing to work. Lily's teacher, Mrs. Patterson, looked surprised to see her. "Ms. Bennett, good to see you. How is Lily feeling?" "Much better, thank you. She's eager to get back." "That's wonderful. We've missed her." Mrs. Patterson hesitated. "I heard about what happened at the diner. I'm sorry." Clara forced a smile. "Thank you. It worked out." She kissed Lily goodbye and headed back to her car. She had the whole day ahead of her with no job to rush to, no immediate crisis to manage. It felt strange, unmoored. She needed a plan. First priority, find a new job. She'd start checking the classifieds, putting in applications, asking around. With the money from Jim and his men, she could afford to be selective. Wait for something better than the Copper Creek Diner. But before she could even start the car, her phone rang. Unknown number. Hello, Clara Bennett. A man's voice official sounding. Yes? This is Detective Mark Chen with the Oak Haven Police Department. I need you to come down to the station to answer some questions. Clara's stomach dropped. Questions about what? About theft allegations at the Copper Creek Diner. That's ridiculous. I never stole anything. Then you won't mind coming in to clear things up. Can you be here in an hour? It wasn't really a question. Clara knew that tone. I'll be there. She hung up, her hands shaking. Greg wasn't just spreading lies he was going to the police. He was actually trying to have her arrested. Clara drove to the police station in a daze. The building was small and aging like everything else in Oak Haven, with yellowed linoleum and fluorescent lights that flickered. Sheriff Dawson's domain. Detective Chen met her in the lobby, Asian, maybe 40, with kind eyes that made Clara want to trust him, but cop eyes that made her cautious. He led her to an interview room, offered her coffee, which she declined, and sat across from her with a folder. Ms. Bennett, Greg Miller has filed a formal complaint alleging that you stole approximately $300 from the Copper Creek Diner over the past month through register manipulation. Clara's voice came out steady despite the fear crawling up her spine. That's a lie. He has documentation, count sheets showing discrepancies on days you worked. Those count sheets are fake or manipulated. I never stole a dime. Chen opened the folder and showed her the papers. Clara recognized them. Greg's handwriting numbers that looked official, but she knew were wrong. I counted my register perfectly every single night, Clara insisted. Ask Sarah Thompson, the other waitress. She can verify. We plan to talk to Ms. Thompson, but right now I'm talking to you. Chen leaned back. Help me understand something. You were fired 2 days ago for allegedly being short on your register. The next day you somehow come up with $600 cash to pay rent you couldn't afford the day before. Where did that money come from? Clara's heart hammered. Friends help me. What friends? That's private. Ms. Bennett, I'm trying to help you here, but you're not making it easy. A sudden influx of cash right after being accused of theft looks suspicious. The money wasn't stolen, it was a gift. From who? Clara thought about Jim's card in her pocket, about his offer to help if she had trouble. But calling a biker gang to solve a problem with the police seemed like a terrible idea. I'd rather not say. Chen sighed. Look, I've known Greg Miller for 15 years. He's not exactly Employee of the Year. Between you and me, I think there's more to this story, but I need you to work with me. What do you want me to do? Tell me the truth? All of it. So Clara did. She told him about standing up for the bikers, about getting fired, about the hospital bill, and the rent deadline, and the desperation. She told him about Jim and his men showing up at her trailer with an envelope full of cash because they believed in rewarding people who did the right thing. Chen listened without interrupting, taking notes occasionally. When she finished, he sat quiet for a long moment. That's quite a story, he said finally. It's the truth. I believe you, but here's the problem. Greg's count sheets fake or not create a paper trail. Without evidence proving they're false, this turns into a he said, she said, and he's got documentation. Sarah has the real receipts. She found them yesterday. She can prove the counts were accurate. Chen perked up. She has the original receipts. Yes, transaction records, everything. I need to see those today if possible. I'll call her right now. Clara stepped out of the room and dialed Sarah's number. It rang 4 times before going to voicemail. She tried again. Same result. A cold feeling settled in Clara's chest. She went back into the interview room. She's not answering. Where does she work? The diner, but I'll send an officer to talk to her. Chen stood. Ms. Bennett, don't leave town. I'm not charging you with anything right now, but this investigation is ongoing. Am I free to go? For now. Clara left the station feeling like she'd narrowly avoided falling into a pit, but was still teetering on the edge. She tried calling Sarah 3 more times on the drive home. No answer. Finally, a text came through. Can't talk? Call you later? That was it. No explanation. Clara's anxiety ratcheted higher. Something was wrong. She could feel it. She drove to the Copper Creek Diner. Sarah's car was in the parking lot. Clara went inside. Greg stood behind the counter, his arms crossed, his face smug. Well, well, look who came crawling back. Where's Sarah? Quit this morning, said she couldn't work for a liar anymore. Greg's smile widened. Good riddance, and before you asked, she tried to show me some receipts she claimed proved you didn't steal nothing. I told her those receipts didn't prove anything, except maybe she was in on it with you. Clara's hands clenched into fists. You know I didn't steal from you. What I know is you cost me business, embarrassed me in front of customers, and have been skimming from my register for weeks. The police will sort it out. Sarah has proof. Sarah has copies of receipts that don't mean nothing. I got the official count sheets signed and dated. My word against yours, Clara, and guess which one carries more weight in this town? He was right, and they both knew it. Greg had been in Oakhaven his whole life. He knew everyone greased every palm that mattered. Clara was nobody, a struggling single mother. People barely noticed unless she was serving them coffee. You won't get away with this, Clara said, hating how empty the word sounded. Already have sweetheart. Now get out of my diner before I call the cops for trespassing. Clara left her rage so hot she could barely see straight. She sat in her car and called Sarah again. This time Sarah answered. Clara, I'm so sorry. What happened? He fired me, said if I kept pushing the receipt thing, he'd make sure I never worked in this town again. Sarah's voice cracked. I have 3 kids, Clara. I can't afford to lose this job. I can't afford to fight him. But you have the proof. Proof doesn't matter if nobody believes it. He's already calling everyone, telling them I'm a liar trying to cover for you. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. The line went dead. Clara sat there feeling the walls close in again. No job. Under police investigation. No witnesses willing to testify. Greg's lies spreading like poison through the town. She pulled out Jim's card and stared at the number. She didn't want to be that person, the person who called on dangerous men to solve her problems. She wanted to handle this herself, to fight fair, to win through truth and justice. But truth didn't seem to matter much when the person with power decided to lie. Clara dialed the number. Jim answered on the second ring. This is Jim. It's Clara Bennett. You said to call if I had trouble. What kind of trouble? She told him everything, the police, the fake count sheets, Greg's lies, Sarah backing down. When she finished, there was a long silence. Hang tight, Jim said finally. We'll handle this. I don't want you to do anything illegal. We won't, but we will make sure the truth comes out. One way or another. He hung up and Clara sat in the parking lot of the Copper Creek Diner, wondering what she just set in motion. She didn't have to wait long to find out. 2 hours after Clara's call to Jim, she heard them coming. The rumble started as a distant thunder growing louder until it shook the windows of her trailer. Clara stepped outside and felt her breath catch. Not 5 motorcycles this time, not 10. The road leading into Starview Mobile Estates was filled with them, dozens upon dozens, chrome gleaming in the afternoon sun, engines roaring like a promise of reckoning. Mrs. Chen came out of her trailer, her hand pressed to her chest. Clara, what on earth? It's okay, Clara said, though her heart was racing. They're here to help. The bikes rolled into the park slowly, respectfully, like they understood the difference between power and intimidation. Jim led the procession, his massive frame unmistakable even at a distance. Behind him came riders of every size and age, some with gray beards, like Jim, others younger, with hard eyes and harder smiles. Clara counted 30, then 40, then stopped counting because they kept coming. They filled the small parking area and lined the streets, engines cutting off one by one until the silence felt almost as loud as the roar had been. Jim dismounted and walked toward Clara, his boots crunching on the gravel. You made quite the entrance, Clara said, trying to keep her voice steady. Figured the town should know we take care of our own. Jim's expression was calm, but his eyes held something fierce. You ready to fix this mess? I don't even know where to start. We do. First things first, you got copies of your schedule from the diner times you worked, registers you were on, Clara nodded. In the trailer. I kept everything. Good. Get them. We're going to need documentation. Jim turned to one of his men. Marcus, go with her. Make sure we got everything we need. Marcus was the one with the scar across his cheek, the one who had spoken at her trailer before. Up close, Clara could see his eyes were kind, despite the rough exterior. He followed her inside, waited patiently, while she dug through her small filing box and pulled out pay stubs, schedules, even the notes she'd kept tracking her hours because Greg had shorted her before. You keep good records, Marcus observed. When you're poor, you have to. One mistake and you're done. Not anymore. You got brothers now, a whole charter of them. The word brothers made Clara's throat tight. She'd been alone for so long, fighting every battle by herself. The idea of having people, any people standing with her, felt foreign and terrifying and desperately welcome all at once. They went back outside where Jim was on his phone, his voice low and firm. He hung up as Clara approached. Detective Chen's expecting us at the station in 20 minutes. You're going to make a formal statement, and we're going to make sure he takes this seriously. All of you are coming? Not all. That'd be overkill. Jim smiled slightly. Just me and Cole and Tommy. Enough to make the point without starting a war. What about Greg? Jim's smile faded. We'll get to Greg, but first we handle the legal side, everything by the book. Can't give them any excuse to dismiss this as biker intimidation. Clara clutched her documents. What if it doesn't work? What if Chen still doesn't believe me? He will, trust me. They rode to the police station in a convoy, Clara and her battered Honda, 3 massive motorcycles flanking her like an honor guard. People on the street stopped and stared. Some pulled out phones to take pictures. Clara saw curtains twitching in windows, saw people stepping out of shops to watch them pass. Oak Haven was a small town. By tonight, everyone would know the Hells Angels were back, and this time they weren't just passing through. At the station, Detective Chen met them in the lobby, his expression carefully neutral, but Clara could see the tension in his shoulders. Jim and his men were polite, removing their sunglasses, speaking in calm, measured tones, but their presence filled the small building like electricity before a storm. Ms. Bennett, Chen said, I see you brought representation. Moral support, Jim corrected. Clara's here to give you what you need to close this case proper. Chen led them to a conference room instead of the interview room this time. Clara laid out her documents on the table schedules. Pay stubs, her personal notes, tracking every shift, every hour, every register count. These show I worked. The registers Greg claims were short on these specific dates, Clara explained, pointing to the paperwork. But if you look at the times, half of these, I wasn't even working. Sarah was. And on 3 of them, Greg himself was running the register because we were short-staffed. Chen examined the documents closely. This is good, but it's still your word against his count sheets. What if those count sheets were falsified? Jim asked quietly. I'd need proof of that. You got Greg's originals? They're evidence in the file. Mind if we take a look? Chen hesitated, then pulled the file and spread out Greg's count sheets. Jim leaned over them, his weathered fingers tracing the numbers. Then he pulled out his phone and made a call. Deacon, yeah, it's Jim. Need you down at the Oak Haven police station. Bring your kit. He hung up and looked at Chen. Got a brother who's a forensic accountant. Used to work for the IRS before he saw the light and joined us. He can tell you if those numbers have been tampered with. That's not standard procedure. You want to solve this or not? Jim's voice remained calm but carried weight. Because from where I'm sitting, you got a young mother being railroaded by a small-time crook with connections. You can either be part of the problem or part of the solution, detective. The silence stretched. Clara held her breath. Finally, Chen nodded. Fine, but he examines them here under supervision. 20 minutes later, a man in his 50s walked in wearing reading glasses and carrying a battered briefcase. Deacon looked more like a college professor than a biker Finn, balding with gentle hands and sharp eyes. He shook Chen's hand professionally and got to work. Clara watched him examine Greg's count sheets under a magnifying glass, holding them up to the light, running his fingers over the paper. He pulled out tools from his briefcase, a small microscope, some kind of light pen measurement devices Clara didn't recognize. Well, Jim asked after 10 minutes. Deacon looked up. These numbers have been altered. See here. He pointed to several entries. Different pen pressure, slightly different ink saturation. Someone went back and changed these after the fact. And here, he indicated another section. You can see erasure marks under the current numbers. Amateur work, really. Chen's expression shifted. You're sure? Absolutely. I'd stake my reputation on it. These documents were falsified probably within the last week based on the ink oxidation. Clara felt tears spring to her eyes. Proof. Real, actual proof that Greg had lied. Can you write that up officially? Chen asked. Already on it. Deacon pulled out a laptop. Chen turned to Clara. Ms. Bennett, I owe you an apology. It looks like you were telling the truth all along. Does this mean the investigation is over? Against you, yes. Against Greg Milder for filing a false police report and attempting to frame you for theft. Chen's jaw tightened. That's just getting started. Jim stood. We'll let you handle that part. But detective, make it stick. This man tried to destroy an innocent woman's life out of spite. That can't stand. It won't. You have my word. They left the station with Clara feeling lighter than she had since this nightmare began. Jim walked her to her car, his hand briefly touching her shoulder. See, truth wins when you got the right people backing you up. Thank you. I don't know how to repay. Stop. We don't do this for payback. We do it because it's right. Jim's pale blue eyes held hers. But we're not done yet. Greg needs to understand what happens when you come after our family. Jim, I don't want anyone getting hurt. Nobody's getting hurt, but he is going to have to face consequences, the legal kind and the social kind. Jim pulled out his phone. You know anyone who works at the health department? Clara blinked at the unexpected question. What health department and restaurant inspections? You know anyone? Hey, my cousin's husband works there. Why? Because I'm betting Greg's diner has about 100 health code violations. Kitchens don't stay that greasy without cutting corners. Time for an unscheduled inspection, don't you think? Clara felt a smile tug at her lips despite everything. That seems almost too easy. Best solutions usually are. What about the newspaper? This town got one. The Oak Haven Gazette comes out twice a week. Perfect. We're going to give them a story they can't resist. Corrupt businessman falsifies records to frame single mother gets exposed by forensic accountant. That's front page material. Greg will lose his business. Greg deserves to lose his business. He's been stealing from employees, manipulating books, probably dodging taxes. This is just the first thread. We pull it, the whole sweater unravels. Clara thought about Greg's smug face, about the way he grabbed her arm, about the $300 he'd claimed she stole when all she'd ever done was work herself to the bone for poverty wages. She thought about Sarah losing her job for trying to tell the truth. She thought about every waitress who'd probably suffered under Greg's petty tyranny for years. Do it, she said. Jim made his calls. Clara called her cousin, who called his husband at the health department. Within an hour, an inspector was on his way to the Copper Creek Diner. Jim called someone at the newspaper. Apparently, the editor owed the club a favor from years back. By evening, a reporter was at the police station getting the full story from Detective Chen. Clara went home to pick up Lily from school, trying to process how quickly everything was changing. The whole ride home, Lily chattered about her day, about the art project she'd made, about the friend who'd shared cookies at lunch. Normal kid stuff. Beautiful kid stuff. Mama, why are there so many motorcycles outside our house again? Clara pulled into the trailer park and saw what Lily meant. The bikes were still there. The men gathered in small groups, talking and laughing, like they'd decided to make Starview their temporary headquarters. They're our friends, baby. They're helping us. With what? With making sure bad people can't hurt good people. Lily seemed to accept this with the easy logic of childhood. They went inside and Clara made dinner while Lily did homework at the kitchen table. Normal. Everything felt almost normal for the first time in days. Then her phone rang. Sarah. Clara, oh my God, have you heard? Heard what? The health inspector shut down the diner. Greg's freaking out. They found mice droppings in the storage area, grease buildup. That's apparently a fire hazard, expired food in the walk-in, improper temperature controls, the list goes on. He shut down pending a full remediation and reinspection. Clara felt a fierce satisfaction bloom in her chest. Good. There's more. A reporter from the Gazette called me asking about Greg falsifying records. I told her everything. She's running a story tomorrow. What did you tell her? The truth, that you were the best worker he had, that you never stole anything, that he fired you for standing up to him and then tried to frame you when you wouldn't go quietly. I showed her the real receipts. I'm done being scared of him, Clara. Thank you, Clara whispered. Thank you for being brave. You were brave first. I'm just following your lead. After they hung up, Clara went outside where Jim and several of his men were gathered around a small fire in an old barrel, the flames casting dancing shadows across their weathered faces. The diner shut down, she told them. Health violations. Heard about that, Jim said with satisfaction. Also heard the newspapers running your story on the front page tomorrow. This is happening so fast. Momentum, Clara. You get it going in the right direction, things tend to avalanche. Jim poked at the fire with a stick. But we got one more piece of business on to handle. What's that? Sheriff Dawson. He's been in Greg's pocket for years. Takes payments to look the other way on health code stuff, labor violations, probably tax evasion. We need to shine a light there too. How do you know all this? Jim smiled. We've been asking around. Amazing what people tell you when they realize you're actually listening and willing to help. Turns out Greg and Dawson have been running a nice little corrupt operation for almost a decade. Time to shut it down. That's bigger than just helping me. Started with helping you. But corruption is like rot. You can't just cut out one piece and leave the rest. Gotta clean the whole thing. Clara felt something shift in her understanding. This wasn't just about her anymore. It was about Oak Haven itself, about all the people who'd been quietly crushed under the weight of men like Greg and Dawson. The bikers weren't just helping her, they were trying to fix a whole broken system. What do you need from me? She asked. Nothing. You just take care of your daughter. We'll handle the rest. But Clara shook her head. No, this is my fight too. Tell me what I can do. Jim studied her for the long moment. You know anyone else who's been hurt by Greg or Dawson? Anyone who might be willing to talk to the authorities? Probably half the women who've worked at that diner over the years. Let me make some calls. She spent the evening reaching out to former coworkers, women she'd seen come and go during her 3 years at the Copper Creek. Lisa, who'd been fired when she got pregnant and couldn't hide it anymore. Jennifer, who'd complained about Greg touching her and found herself accused of theft the next week. Marcy, who'd tried to unionize the waitresses and been blacklisted from every restaurant in town. One by one, Clara listened to their stories. One by one, they agreed to talk to Detective Chen, to the newspaper, to anyone who would finally listen. By the time she put Lily to bed that night, Clara had a list of 12 women willing to come forward. 12 voices that had been silenced, now ready to speak. She gave the list to Jim, who nodded with grim satisfaction. This is more than enough. Tomorrow's going to be interesting. Tomorrow came with the roar of thunder and the flash of lightning. A storm rolled through Oak Haven in the early morning hours, sheets of rain hammering the trailer's tin roof. Clara woke to the sound and the smell of ozone and felt like even the weather was cleansing something rotten from the air. By the time she got Lily ready for school, the rain had stopped, but the sky remained dark and heavy. Clara drove through puddles that reflected the gray clouds, feeling like she was moving through some kind of threshold between what was and what would be. The Oak Haven Gazette was already out. Clara bought a copy at the gas station and stared at the front page. Local businessman accused of fraud, screamed the headline. Below it, a photo of Greg looking angry and another of Clara holding Lily. The article laid out everything: the falsified count sheets, Deacon's forensic analysis, Sarah's testimony, the health code violations. It mentioned the 12 other women who'd come forward with complaints about Greg's treatment. And in the final paragraph, a line that made Clara's hands shake. Sheriff Dawson has declined to comment on allegations that he accepted payments from Miller in exchange for ignoring health and labor violations. The county prosecutor's office has announced it will be opening an investigation. Clara sat in her car reading the article 3 times, tears streaming down her face. It was real. It was actually happening. The truth was out there for everyone to see. Her phone started ringing. Friends she hadn't heard from in months expressing support. Former co-workers thanking her for being brave. Even her mother called, though Clara let that one go to voicemail. She drove Lily to school and then headed to the police station where Detective Chen had asked her to come in. Jim and several of his men were already there, along with Sarah and 3 other women Clara recognized from the diner. Ms. Bennett, Chen greeted her. Thanks for coming. We're taking formal statements from everyone this morning. The prosecutor wants a full case built before we move forward with charges. Charges against Greg and potentially against Sheriff Dawson. The FBI's been notified about the corruption allegations. They're sending someone down to investigate. The FBI. This had gone from a small-town dispute to a federal case in less than 48 hours. Clara spent 2 hours giving her statement, walking through every detail of her time at the diner, every instance of Greg's manipulation and intimidation, every penny she'd been shorted on paychecks. When she finally finished, she felt wrung out but clean, like she'd purged something toxic from her system. She walked out of the station to find Jim waiting by his motorcycle. How'd it go? Good, I think. It's hard to tell. It went good. Chen told me they've got enough to charge Greg with fraud, filing false reports, labor violations, and about 6 health code infractions. Dawson's looking at corruption charges if the FBI finds what we think they'll find. Clara leaned against her car, suddenly exhausted. I keep waiting for the other shoe to drop, for something to go wrong. Nothing's going wrong. You won, you fought back, and you won. We won. I couldn't have done any of this without you and your brothers. Jim shrugged. You'd already done the hard part, standing up when it mattered. We just made sure people paid attention. A car pulled into the parking lot, a news van from the regional station in the next county over. A reporter hopped out, spotted Clara, and started walking over with a cameraman in tow. Clara Bennett, I'm Monica Richardson from Channel 7 News. Can we get a statement about your case against Greg Miller? Clara looked at Jim, who nodded encouragingly. Sure, Clara said. What do you want to know? The interview took 20 minutes. Clara told her story calmly, factually, trying to focus on the broader issues: how small-town corruption hurts vulnerable workers, how important it is for people to stand up for each other, how grateful she was for the support of the community, and especially the motorcycle club that had believed in her. When they finished, Monica smiled. This is going to be our lead story tonight. David versus Goliath, small-town justice, all of it. You're going to inspire a lot of people. After they left, Clara sat in her car feeling surreal. Her life had been so small, so contained to just surviving day to day. Now she was on the news. Now she was part of something bigger. Her phone rang. An unknown number, but she answered it anyway. Is this Clara Bennett? Yes. My name is Rachel Morrison. I own the Bluebird Cafe over on Maple Street. I saw the article in the Gazette this morning. Clara's stomach tightened. Here it comes, she thought. Someone calling to tell her she'd never work in this town again. I want to offer you a job, Rachel continued. Manager position, full benefits, actual living wage. I've been trying to run this place on my own for 2 years and I need help. Someone with your backbone and integrity. That's exactly who I want on my team. Clara couldn't speak for a moment. Are you serious? Dead serious. Can you come by tomorrow to talk details? Yes, absolutely. Thank you so much. Don't thank me. Thank yourself for standing up when most people would have stayed quiet. That takes real courage. Clara hung up in a daze. A job. A real job with benefits and decent pay. She wanted to scream, to cry, to drive straight to Lily's school and hug her daughter and tell her everything was going to be okay. Instead, she drove home and found the entire trailer park gathered outside her trailer. Mrs. Chen, the Lopez family from 2 units down, old Mr. Patterson, who never talked to anyone, the single dad with 3 kids who worked nights at the factory, all of them standing there with food and decorations and smiles. Surprise, Mrs. Chen called out. We're having a celebration. For what? For you, dear, for showing this town what real courage looks like. They'd brought casseroles and cookies and potato salad. Someone had strung up lights between the trailers. Another neighbor had brought a speaker and was playing music. Kids ran around laughing while adults set up folding tables and chairs. Jim and his men were there too, helping set up, laughing with the neighbors, looking far less intimidating, surrounded by families and food. Clara felt her throat close up. You guys didn't have to do this. Yes, we did, Mrs. Chen said firmly. You've been carrying weight for all of us, fighting battles we were too scared to fight. Time we gave you something back. The celebration lasted into the evening. Clara called the school and arranged for Lily to come home on the bus, and when her daughter arrived and saw the party, her face lit up with pure joy. Is this for your birthday, Mama? No, baby. It's just because people are happy. Happy about what? Happy that good things can happen, even when everything seems dark. They ate and laughed, and for the first time in years, Clara felt like she belonged somewhere, like she was part of a community instead of just surviving on its edges. As the sun set, Jim found her standing slightly apart from the crowd watching Lily play with the other children. You did good, Clara, real good. I just told the truth. Sometimes that's the bravest thing a person can do. Jim paused. We'll be heading out tomorrow. Got to get back to our own lives. But you ever need anything, you call that number. Day or night. We meant what we said, your family now. Clara nodded, not trusting herself to speak. And Clara, don't let anyone ever make you feel small again. You're stronger than you know. The next morning, Clara woke to the sound of motorcycles starting up. She went outside in her bathrobe and watched as Jim and his men prepared to leave. They moved with the easy efficiency of people who'd done this 1,000 times, checking bikes, securing gear, pulling on gloves and helmets. Jim saw her and walked over. "Take care of yourself and that little girl." "I will. Thank you for everything." "You already thanked us. Now it's time for you to live the life you deserve." He handed her something, a patch with the club's colors and a phone number embroidered underneath. "Honorary member. You ever need anything, you show that, and any brother in the country will help you." "That's a promise." Clara held the patch carefully. "I don't know what to say." "Don't say anything. Just be happy. That's all the thanks we need." One by one, the engines roared to life. The convoy pulled out of Starview Mobile Estates, leaving behind the rumble of exhaust and the smell of freedom. Clara stood in her driveway holding the patch and watching until the last bike disappeared from view. Then she went inside, got dressed, and drove to the Bluebird Cafe to start her new life. The cafe was small and charming, with blue painted shutters and window boxes full of flowers. Rachel Morrison turned out to be a woman in her 50s with kind eyes and capable hands. They talked for an hour about responsibilities, pay benefits. Clara would start at $15 an hour with health insurance that covered Lily too. She'd work normal hours, no more doubles, no more getting called in on her days off. "When can you start?" Rachel asked. "Tomorrow if you need me." "Tomorrow it is." Clara drove home feeling like she was floating. She picked up Lily from school and took her for ice cream, a small celebration, just the two of them. "Mama, you seem different." Lily observed chocolate ice cream on her chin. "Different how?" "Happy, like really happy." Clara wiped the ice cream off her daughter's face and kissed her forehead. "I am happy, baby. Things are finally getting better." That night, after Lily was asleep, Clara sat at her kitchen table and counted the money she had left, just over $1,600 after all the bills were paid. She put $500 in the new savings account, kept $100 for immediate expenses, and made a decision about the rest. The next morning, she drove to the Copper Creek Diner. The place was dark, a notice from the health department taped to the door listing all the violations. Clara felt no satisfaction seeing it closed, just a quiet sense of justice finally being served. She left an envelope taped to the door. Inside was $1,000 in cash and a note. "For Sarah and all the other women Greg hurt. Use this to get back on your feet. You deserve better." See, then she went to work at the Bluebird Cafe and started building something new. 3 weeks passed in a blur of normalcy that felt almost too good to be true. Clara woke each morning without the knot of dread in her stomach. She made Lily breakfast with actual groceries instead of stretching pennies. She drove to work at the Bluebird Cafe, where Rachel treated her like a valued partner instead of disposable labor. She came home in time to help with homework and make dinner and tuck her daughter into bed without collapsing from exhaustion. Life was good, almost suspiciously good. Then the phone call came. Clara was wiping down tables after the lunch rush when her cell rang. Detective Chen's name flashed on the screen. "Ms. Bennett, we need you to come down to the station. There's been a development in the case." Her stomach dropped. "What kind of development?" "I'd rather discuss it in person. Can you be here in 30 minutes? "I'm at work." "This is important, Ms. Bennett." Rachel overheard and waved her toward the door. "Go, I've got things covered here." Clara drove to the station with her hands gripping the steering wheel too tight, her mind racing through possibilities. Had Greg found a way to turn things around? Had Dawson pulled some strings? Had the case fallen apart? Chen met her in the lobby, his expression unreadable. "Thanks for coming so quickly. Follow me." He led her to the same conference room where they'd examined the falsified count sheets. But this time, 2 other people waited inside, a woman in a dark suit with FBI credentials clipped to her belt, and a man Clara didn't recognize wearing an expensive-looking blazer. "Ms. Bennett, this is Special Agent Catherine Walsh from the FBI and Thomas Brennan from the County Prosecutor's Office." Clara's mouth went dry. "Am I in trouble?" "No," Agent Walsh said quickly, gesturing to a chair. "Please sit down. You're not in any trouble. We just need to talk to you about what we've uncovered." Clara sat her hard, hammering. "What have you uncovered?" Brennan opened a thick folder. "When we started investigating Greg Miller and Sheriff Dawson, we found something much bigger than small-town corruption. We found evidence of a money laundering operation that's been running through the Copper Creek Diner for at least 6 years. Clara blinked. "Money laundering, Greg?" Miller was processing cash payments for a regional drug distribution network. Agent Walsh explained. They'd bring dirty money, he'd run it through the diner as false receipts, take his cut, and send the clean money back. Sheriff Dawson provided protection, made sure no one looked too closely at the books. Clara felt like the floor had tilted. I worked there for 3 years. I never saw anything like that. You weren't supposed to. Miller kept it completely separate from regular operations. But when we started digging into his financial records because of your complaint, we found the discrepancies. Hundreds of thousands of dollars in receipts that didn't match actual inventory purchases. Ghost customers, fictional transactions, all of it. So when he accused me of stealing, he was panicking, Chen interjected. You'd drawn attention to the books by insisting your counts were accurate. He needed a scapegoat to explain any irregularities in case someone started looking closer. He just didn't expect you to fight back, Mohard. Clara's mind reeled. She'd thought she was just dealing with a petty tyrant. Instead, she'd accidentally stumbled into exposing a criminal enterprise. Where's Greg now? Federal custody, Walsh said, along with Sheriff Dawson and 3 other individuals connected to the distribution network. They're looking at serious time money laundering, conspiracy drug trafficking charges. And you're sure I'm not? You're completely clear, Brennan assured her. In fact, you're a witness for the prosecution. We'll need you to testify about Miller's business practices, the falsified records, his attempts to frame you. Your testimony will help establish the pattern of fraud that made the money laundering possible. Clara felt simultaneously relieved and terrified. Testify in court. Eventually, yes. The trial won't be for months, but we wanted to give you advance notice. Walsh leaned forward. Mr. Bennett, I know this is overwhelming, but what you did standing up, insisting on the truth, even when it cost you everything, that's what broke this case open. You should be proud. Proud wasn't exactly what Clara felt. Shocked, maybe. Vindicated, definitely. But also scared because testifying against drug dealers sounded dangerous in ways she hadn't signed up for. Will I be safe? Will Lily be safe? We'll make sure of it, Walsh promised. These guys aren't violent players. They're mid-level money handlers, not enforcers. But we'll provide protection if you're concerned. Clara thought about Jim's patch tucked away in her dresser drawer, about his promise that she could call anytime. I have people looking out for me. The motorcycle club, Chen said, not quite a question. They're good people. They are, Walsh agreed, surprising Clara. We've had dealings with that charter before. They run clean help. Their community don't tolerate the kind of criminal activity Miller was involved in. Between them and us, you'll be fine. After another hour of questions and paperwork, Clara left the station feeling like she'd been dropped into someone else's life. She sat in her car and pulled out her phone, staring at Jim's number. She should probably let him know what was happening, but before she could dial, another call came through. Sarah. Clara, oh my God, have you seen the news? No what? Turn on Channel 7. They're doing a special report on the diner. The money laundering thing is everywhere. Clara pulled up the news on her phone. Sure enough, there was Monica Richardson standing outside the Copper Creek Diner, now with additional FBI notices posted on the door reporting on the federal investigation. Sources say that a single mother's complaint about workplace fraud led to the discovery of a multi-million-dollar money laundering operation, Monica said into the camera. Clara Bennett, the whistleblower who refused to stay silent, has become an unlikely hero in what law enforcement is calling one of the biggest busts in this region's history. Clara watched in disbelief as the report continued, showing photos of Greg and Dawson being led away in handcuffs, interviewing FBI agents about the scope of the investigation, even playing clips from Clara's interview 3 weeks ago. This is insane, Clara whispered. You're famous, Sarah said. Everyone's talking about you. You're trending on social media, Clara. People are calling you the bravest person in Oak Haven. Clara didn't feel brave. She felt overwhelmed and slightly nauseated. She drove home in a daze, stopping to pick up Lily from school. Her daughter bounced into the car full of energy. Mama, everyone at school is talking about you. Mrs. Patterson showed us the newspaper and said you're a hero. I'm not a hero, baby. I just told the truth. That's what heroes do, Lily said matter-of-factly. They tell the truth even when it's scary. Out of the mouths of babes, Clara thought. Maybe Lily was right. Maybe being a hero wasn't about having superpowers or doing impossible things. Maybe it was just about standing up when everyone else sat down. When they got home, Clara found a package on her doorstep. No return address, just her name written in precise block letters. She brought it inside cautiously, half expecting something terrible. Inside was a letter and a cashier's check. The letter read, "Ms. Bennett, I'm an attorney representing several individuals who wish to remain anonymous. They were victims of Greg Miller's various schemes over the years and have authorized me to distribute restitution payments now that his criminal activity has been exposed. Your share comes to $15,000, compensation for the wages you were shorted, the emotional distress you suffered, and your courage in exposing his operation. Please accept this with their gratitude and admiration." Clara stared at the check until the numbers blurred. $15,000. Added to what she already had saved, that was enough for a real emergency fund, enough to think about moving to a better place, enough to breathe. She called Rachel. "I know this is crazy, but I need to ask you something." "What's up?" "The Copper Creek Diner. It's been seized by the government, right? As part of the criminal case." "That's what I heard. Why?" "What happens to seized properties? Can someone buy them?" Rachel was quiet for a moment. "You're thinking of buying the diner. I know it sounds insane. It sounds brilliant. That location is prime real estate. If you could get it for the right price, renovate it, rebrand it." Rachel's voice picked up enthusiasm. "Clara, that could actually work. Let me make some calls. I know a commercial real estate agent who deals with seized property sales. I don't even know if I have enough money. Let's find out what's possible before we worry about what's not." Clara hung up feeling dizzy with possibility. Buy the diner. Transform the place that had tried to destroy her into something good. It felt like justice and poetry all mixed together. That night, after Lilith was asleep, Clara sat at her kitchen table and did math. The $15,000 from the settlement, plus the $1,600 she'd saved, plus the $1,000 she'd gotten back after giving money to Sarah, that was over $16,000 total. Not enough to buy a business outright, but maybe enough for a down payment. Maybe enough to get started. Her phone buzzed, a text from a number she didn't recognize. "Ms. Bennett, this is Marcus from the MC. Jim wanted me to check in, make sure everything's okay after the news broke today. You need anything, just holler." Clara smiled and texted back, "Everything's good, better than good. Thank you for checking." That's what brothers do. You're family now, remember? The word family hit her differently this time. For so long, Clara had equated family with her mother, with judgment and disappointment and conditional love that always came with strings attached. But maybe family was something you chose. Maybe it was the people who showed up when you needed them, who had your back without asking for anything in return. She thought about Jim and his men, about Sarah standing up despite being afraid, about Rachel offering her a job when everyone else saw her as trouble, about Mrs. Chen and the neighbors throwing a celebration, about Detective Chen and Agent Walsh fighting for justice even when it would have been easier to let things slide. She had family, more than she'd ever realized. The next morning, Rachel's real estate contact called. "Mrs. Bennett, I have good news. The Copper Creek Diner property is being auctioned by the federal government next month as part of the asset forfeiture. Starting bid is $50,000. Clara's heart sank. "I don't have $50,000. But you could get a small business loan. With your story, with the publicity, with the right business plan, banks would be falling over themselves to fund this. It's a feel-good story, and you've got proven management experience now from working at the Bluebird." "I've only been there 3 weeks. "Doesn't matter. You're the woman who took down a criminal enterprise. That takes guts and smarts. Banks invest in people, Ms. Bennett. Let me set up some meetings." By the end of the week, Clara had met with 3 different banks. 2 turned her down, too risky, too new to management, too much uncertainty. But the third, a small community bank run by a woman named Patricia Chen, who turned out to be Mrs. Chen's niece, saw something different. "I've known about you my whole life," Patricia said, sitting across from Clara in her office. "My aunt talks about you constantly, how hard you work, how much you love your daughter, how you never complain even when things are terrible. That's the kind of person I want to invest in. But I don't have much collateral. You have something better. You have integrity. You have a story that will bring customers through the door. You have a community that's rallying behind you." Patricia pulled out paperwork. "I can offer you a small business loan for $40,000 at a reasonable interest rate. Combined with your savings, that should be enough to win the auction and have some left over for renovations." Clara felt tears prick her eyes. "Why are you doing this?" "Because my aunt was right about you. Because this town needs more people willing to stand up and fight for what's right. Because I believe you'll succeed. Patricia slid the papers across the desk. So what do you say? Want to buy a diner? Clara thought about Lily, about the life they could build. She thought about turning the Copper Creek from a place of corruption into something honest and good. She thought about all the people who'd helped her get here and how maybe, just maybe, this was her chance to pay it forward. Yes, she said, let's do this. The auction was scheduled for the first week of October. Clara spent the intervening weeks working at the Bluebird during the day and planning her new business at night. She sketched out menus, researched suppliers, thought about staffing. She called Sarah and offered her a management position if the auction went through. She called the other women who'd been hurt by Greg and asked if any of them wanted jobs. You're serious? Lisa, the woman who'd been fired for getting pregnant, sounded like she might cry. You'd hire me. I'd be honored to have you on the team. Every single person Greg pushed down, every person this town overlooked, those are exactly the people I want to lift up. Word spread. The local newspaper did another story. Former whistleblower plans to transform corrupt diner into symbol of hope. The regional news picked it up. Someone started a crowdfunding campaign to help with renovation costs without Clara even asking, and it raised $12,000 in a week. Clara felt like she was riding a wave. She couldn't control momentum carrying her forward faster than she could process. It was terrifying and exhilarating in equal measure. 2 days before the auction, she got another call, this time from Jim. Clara, it's been a while. How you holding up? Good, really good. Actually, did you hear about the diner? Heard you're planning to buy the place. That's bold. Maybe too bold. The auction's in 2 days and I'm starting to panic. Jim chuckled, the sound warm through the phone. You'll do fine, but that's not why I called. I wanted to give you a heads up. We're riding through Oak Haven this weekend. Thought we'd stop by, check in on our favorite whistleblower. You don't have to do that. Want to, plus we heard about the auction. Figure you might need some moral support. Intimidating the competition is frowned upon, but standing around looking scary is perfectly legal. Clara laughed despite her nerves. You're going to come to a federal property auction. Why not? We're law-abiding citizens. We got a right to be there. The morning of the auction, Clara woke before dawn. She couldn't eat breakfast, could barely keep down coffee. She dressed carefully, her best blouse, the slacks she'd bought specifically for bank meetings, the necklace she'd managed to buy back from the pawn shop with her first paycheck from Rachel. Rachel drove her to the courthouse where the auction was being held. You've got this. Just remember your maximum bid and don't let emotions make you go over. $45,000, that's my absolute max. Stick to it. They walked into the courthouse and Clara froze. The hallway was packed with motorcycles. Dozens of them, chrome gleaming under the fluorescent lights. Jim and his men were there along with what looked like another 20 or 30 bikers Clara didn't recognize. Jim saw her and broke into a grin. Thought we'd bring some friends. This is the full regional charter. Everyone wanted to meet the woman who took down a money laundering ring by accident. Clara felt overwhelmed. You guys didn't have to come. Yes, we did. Your family. Family shows up. Inside the auction room, Clara found a seat near the front. Jim and his men filed in behind her, filling up half the available chairs. The other potential bidders, mostly out-of-town investors in suits, kept glancing nervously at the bikers and whispering to each other. The auctioneer, a thin man with glasses and a nervous demeanor, called the room to order. Ladies and gentlemen, we're here to auction the commercial property formerly known as the Copper Creek Diner, seized as part of federal criminal proceedings. The property includes the building equipment and land. Starting bid is $50,000. Clara's hands shot up before she could second-guess herself. $50,000 to the lady in front. Do I hear 55? A man in the back raised his paddle. 55. Clara's heart hammered. 60. 65. Another investor called, mushed. This was happening too fast. Clara forced herself to breathe, to think. 70. The room went quiet. 70,000 was well above the starting bid. The investors were recalculating, figuring out if the property was worth getting into a bidding war. 70,000, the auctioneer repeated. Do I hear 75? Silence stretched. Clara's palms were sweating. She was already above her maximum, already in territory where she'd need to renegotiate the loan terms or find additional funding. 75, one of the suits finally said. Clara closed her eyes. She couldn't go higher. She'd already stretched too far. This was it. Her dream was about to slip away. Then Jim stood up. He didn't say anything. Just stood there with his arms crossed, his pale blue eyes fixed on the investor who'd just bid. One by one, the other bikers stood too. 30 men, all standing, all silent, all staring at the competition. The investor shifted uncomfortably. Actually, you know what, I'm out. Anyone else? The auctioneer asked, his voice slightly higher than before. 75 going once, going twice. Clara held her breath. Sold to Ms. Clara Bennett for $75,000. The room erupted. The bikers cheered. Rachel hugged her, and Clara sat there in shock, trying to process that she'd just bought a business. She owned property. She was a business owner. Jim leaned down and whispered in her ear, "Told you we'd provide moral support." Clara started crying. She couldn't help it. Happy tears, overwhelmed tears, grateful tears, all mixed together. Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank yourself. You did this. We just made sure you got a fair shot. The paperwork took another 2 hours. Clara signed documents until her hand cramped, transferred funds, received keys and deeds, and a thick folder of ownership papers. Patricia from the bank met her there to finalize the additional loan modification for the extra $25,000. You did it, Patricia said, shaking her hand. Congratulations, Ms. Bennett. You're officially a business owner. Clara walked out of the courthouse holding the keys to the Copper Creek Diner, feeling like she was holding the keys to a new life. The bikers formed an escort as she drove to the property, their motorcycles surrounding her car in a protective formation that made her feel simultaneously safe and slightly ridiculous. At the diner, Clara stood in the empty parking lot staring at the building. It looked different now, not threatening or oppressive, just sad and neglected. The health department notices were still on the door. The windows were grimy, paint peeled from the exterior. But Clara could see past all that. She could see clean windows and fresh paint. She could see customers sitting at tables eating good food treated with respect. She could see herself behind that counter, not as an exploited waitress, but as an owner who valued her employees and served her community. She could see hope. Jim came to stand beside her. What are you going to call it? Clara thought about the $33 that had started everything, about the $3,300 the bikers had given her, about all the threes that had somehow woven through her story. The 33 Diner, she said. A reminder that good things can come from desperate moments. I like it. It's got meaning. Clara unlocked the door and stepped inside for the first time as the owner. The place smelled musty and abandoned. Tables were still set from the last day it had been open abandoned mid-shift when the FBI had raided. The kitchen was a disaster, but none of that mattered. Clara had vision and help in a community that believed in her. She pulled out her phone and called Sarah. It's official, I own it. Can you start Monday? Sarah squealed so loud, Clara had to hold the phone away from her ear. Yes! Oh my God, yes! Clara, this is amazing. Bring coffee when you come. We've got a lot of work to do. Over the next week, Clara assembled her team. Sarah as co-manager, Lisa as head waitress, Jennifer in the kitchen, Marcy handling bookkeeping. Every woman who'd been hurt by Greg now getting a fresh start in the place that had been their prison. The bikers helped with the heavy lifting, literally. They showed up every evening after Clara's shift at the Bluebird, tearing out rotten cabinets, fixing broken equipment, repainting walls. Marcus turned out to be a skilled carpenter. Tommy knew plumbing. Cole had worked construction for 20 years. You don't have to do all this, Clara protested as she watched them work. We want to, Jim said, wielding a paintbrush. Besides, this is fun. Been a while since we worked on something purely good, no complications or politics. Just helping people build something better. The health inspector came for the re-inspection and was visibly shocked by the transformation. Ms. Bennett, this is remarkable. Everything's not just up to code, it exceeds code. The kitchen is cleaner than most restaurants that have been operating for years. We wanted to do it right. You did more than right. You've set a new standard. He signed off on the paperwork. Good luck with the opening. I'll definitely be a customer. The newspaper covered the renovation. Local hero transforms site of corruption into symbol of community. Channel 7 did a follow-up story. The crowdfunding campaign raised enough for Clara to buy all new dishes, new linens, new everything. Patricia from the bank stopped by to check on progress. Clara, I have to tell you, you've become something of a legend in banking circles. Other lenders are calling me asking how I convinced you to work with us. Everyone wants to be part of your story. It's not just my story anymore, Clara said, gesturing to the women working around her. It's all of ours. 2 weeks before the planned grand opening, Clara received another letter, this one from the prosecutor's office. Ms. Bennett, as you know, Greg Miller and Sheriff Dawson have been offered plea deals in exchange for testimony against their suppliers. However, their sentencing will be partially based on victim impact statements. Would you be willing to provide testimony about how their actions affected you and your daughter? Clara stared at the letter for a long time. Part of her wanted to just move on to focus on building instead of dwelling on what had been torn down. But another part knew that silence was complicity, that letting Greg and Dawson off easy sent a message that corruption was acceptable as long as you eventually got caught. She called Agent Walsh. I'll testify, whatever you need. The hearing was scheduled for mid-November, right after the diner's grand opening. Clara spent the intervening weeks preparing in every way she could. She practiced her statement with Rachel. She worked with a therapist Patricia recommended to process the trauma of everything that had happened. She explained to Lily that sometimes adults had to do hard things to make sure bad people face consequences. Are you scared, Mama? Lily asked one night at bedtime. A little, but being scared doesn't mean you don't do what's right. It just means you do it even though you're scared. Like you did at the diner that first time, with the motorcycle men. Clara smiled. Exactly like that. The grand opening of the 33 diner was scheduled for November 1st. Clara spent the night before unable to sleep, running through checklists in her mind, worrying about everything that could go wrong. But when she arrived at 6 a.m. to start prep, she found Jim and a dozen of his brothers already there. Their motorcycles lined up outside like sentinels. What are you doing here so early? Clara asked. Opening day is important. Wanted to make sure you were supported. Jim handed her a coffee. Plus, we figured having some bikes outside might draw attention. Free advertising. Clara hugged him, surprising herself, and probably him too. Thank you for everything. I couldn't have done any of this without you. You absolutely could have. You're the strongest person I know, Clara Bennett. We just helped clear the path a little. By 7 a.m., the rest of the staff had arrived. They worked together in the newly renovated kitchen, preparing for the 9 a.m. opening. The smells of fresh coffee and baking bread filled the air. Everything gleamed: counters, equipment, floors. It was perfect. At 8:45, Clara went to unlock the front door and gasped. A line of people stretched down the block. 50, maybe 75 people, all waiting to be among the first customers at the 33 diner. She recognized faces: Mrs. Chen and her family, Patricia from the bank, Detective Chen off duty with his wife, the reporter Monica Richardson, former co-workers from both the Copper Creek and the Bluebird neighbors from the trailer park, even Lily's teacher, Mrs. Patterson. Clara's eyes filled with tears for what felt like the 100th time in the past month. You ready? Sarah asked from behind her. Clara took a deep breath, wiped her eyes, and smiled. Yeah, let's open the doors. She turned the key, flipped the sign to open, and let the community pour in. The first hour was chaos in the best possible way. Every table filled within minutes. The kitchen hummed with energy as Jennifer and her team cranked out orders. Clara moved between tables, greeting customers, thanking people for coming, her face hurting from smiling so much. Mrs. Chen grabbed her hand as she passed. Clara, dear, this is wonderful. Your grandmother would be so proud. The mention of her grandmother made Clara's throat tight. She thought about the necklace she'd pawned and bought back, now hanging around her neck again. I hope so. By noon, they'd served over 200 people. The cash register rang constantly. Sarah kept having to run to the bank to make deposits because they'd run out of space in the drawer. It was the kind of problem Clara had dreamed about having. Around 1 p.m., a black sedan pulled into the parking lot. Clara watched through the window as Agent Walsh stepped out, followed by Thomas Brennan from the prosecutor's office. Her stomach knotted. They hadn't scheduled a meeting. This had to be something urgent. Sarah, can you cover the floor for a minute? Of course, go. Clara met them at the door. Agent Walsh, Mr. Brennan, I wasn't expecting you. We need to talk, Walsh said quietly. Is there somewhere private? Clara led them to the small office in the back, her mind racing through terrible possibilities. Had the case fallen apart? Had Greg found some loophole? Were they dropping the charges? Brennan closed the door behind them. Ms. Bennett, we have a problem. Greg Miller's attorney contacted us this morning. He's threatening to withdraw from the plea deal. Clara's blood ran cold. Why? He claims that the publicity around your diner opening constitutes prejudicial bias, that you've turned this into a media circus that will make it impossible for his client to receive fair treatment during sentencing. That's ridiculous. I'm just trying to rebuild my life. We know that, Walsh interjected, and legally he doesn't have a leg to stand on. But he's going to try to drag this out, create delays, maybe even push for a full trial instead of the plea agreement. Clara sank into her chair. What does that mean for me? It means more time, more testimony, more stress. Instead of a simple victim impact statement at sentencing, you'd have to testify at a full trial. Be cross-examined by defense attorneys who'll try to make you look like you're out for revenge rather than justice. I am out for justice. I know, but they'll twist it. Brennan leaned against the desk. Here's the thing, we don't need Miller's plea to make our case. We have enough evidence to convict him and Dawson without their cooperation. But it would be messier, take longer, and yes, put more pressure on you as a witness. Clara thought about Lily, about the new life they were building, about having to relive all the trauma in a courtroom while lawyers tried to destroy her credibility. What do you need from me? We need to know if you're willing to go the distance. If Miller pulls out of the plea, this turns into a war. Are you ready for that? Clara thought about standing up in the diner that first day, about calling Jim when she was desperate, about buying this building and transforming it. Every step had been scary. Every choice had risked everything, but she'd taken those steps anyway. I'm ready, she said firmly, whatever it takes. Walsh nodded with something like respect. Good, we'll be in touch about next steps. In the meantime, keep doing what you're doing, build your business, live your life. Don't let him intimidate you into silence. After they left, Clara stood in the office trying to steady her breathing. The sounds of the busy diner filtered through the door, laughter, conversation, the clatter of dishes. Normal sounds? Good sounds? She wouldn't let Greg take this away. Not now, not ever. She went back to work, pushing the worry down, focusing on customers and orders, and keeping everything running smoothly. By closing time at 9 p.m., they had served over 400 people and taken in more money in one day than Clara had made in 2 months at the Copper Creek. After the last customer left, the staff gathered around the counter. Clara had bought champagne, the cheap kind, but still to celebrate. To the 33 diner, she said, raising her plastic cup, to second chances and chosen family and proving that good people can win. They toasted and drank, and Clara felt the weight of the day settle on her shoulders. Exhausted but happy, scared but hopeful. Jim and his men were still outside their motorcycles, a protective perimeter in the parking lot. Clara went out to thank them. You guys have been here all day. You must be exhausted. Worth it, Jim said. Today was special. You built something real here, Clara. Something that matters. I heard about Miller's attorney, about him threatening to pull the plea deal. Jim's expression hardened. How'd you hear about that? Small town, word travels. Clara studied his face. The prosecutor came by, told me there might be a trial, that it could get ugly. You gonna back down? No, I'm gonna fight. Jim smiled. That's my girl. You need anything at all, you call. We'll make sure you're protected. Clara knew what he was offering and felt grateful and slightly terrified in equal measure. I appreciate that, but I think the legal system can handle this. The legal system is slow and sometimes stupid. But okay, we'll be your backup plan. Jim pulled out his phone. Actually, speaking of backup plans, I got someone who wants to talk to you. He dialed a number and put it on speaker. A woman's voice answered. Jim, that's you. Yeah, Diane, got Clara Bennett here with me. Clara, this is Diane Morrison. She's a lawyer out of the state capitol. Specializes in defending whistleblowers and victims of workplace retaliation. Ms. Bennett? Diana's voice was professional and warm. Jim filled me in on your situation. If Miller's attorney is going to play games, you need representation. Someone to protect your interests during the trial proceedings. I'd like to offer my services. I can't afford pro bono. I take these cases because they matter, not because they pay. What Greg Miller did to you, what he tried to do to your reputation, that's exactly the kind of abuse I fight against. Clara felt tears threatening again. Why does everyone keep helping me? Because you're worth helping, Diane said simply. And because what you did standing up when it was easier to stay quiet that inspires people, makes them want to be better. So what do you say? Want a lawyer in your corner? Yes. Thank you. Yes. They talked for another 20 minutes about strategy and timeline and what to expect. By the time Clara hung up, she felt armored instead of vulnerable. She had a lawyer, she had the bikers, she had her staff and her community and a business that was already succeeding beyond her wildest dreams. Let Greg and his attorney try their worst. She was ready. The next 2 weeks blurred together. The diner stayed packed every day. Clara had to hire 3 more waitresses just to keep up with demand. The local news did a follow-up story showing the contrast between the corrupt Copper Creek and the thriving 33 diner. More publicity meant more customers, meant more success. But success brought its own complications. Clara found herself working 16-hour days again, not because she had to, but because there was so much to do. Managing inventory, handling payroll, dealing with suppliers, training new staff. Rachel had to practically force her to take a day off. You're going to burn out, Rachel warned. I've seen it happen. Business owners who work themselves to death in the first year. You need balance, Clara. I know. I'm just scared if I slow down, something will fall apart. Then hire a manager. Delegate. You've got good people around you, use them. Clara knew Rachel was right. She promoted Sarah to general manager and started actually taking Sundays off to spend with Lily. They went to the park, baked cookies, did normal mother-daughter things that Clara had been too exhausted to do for years. Mama, are we rich now? Lily asked one Sunday afternoon as they sat on a blanket watching ducks on the pond. We're not rich, baby. We're just okay. But okay is pretty wonderful. I like okay. It's better than before. Yeah, it really is. The sentencing hearing was scheduled for November 20th. Miller had officially withdrawn from his plea agreement, which meant a full trial would follow, but the sentencing for his already admitted crimes was proceeding. Clara would give her victim impact statement, and Diane would be there to make sure nothing went sideways. The night before the hearing, Clara couldn't sleep. She'd written and rewritten her statement a dozen times. Every version felt either too angry, or too passive, too dramatic, or too understated. Finally, around midnight, she gave up trying to make it perfect and just wrote from the heart. She wrote about Lily struggling to breathe while Clara counted pennies. She wrote about the shame of being accused of theft when all she'd done was work honestly. She wrote about the fear of losing everything because one man decided his pride was more important than the truth. She wrote about the cost of his corruption, not just to her, but to every woman he'd exploited, every employee he'd stolen from every person in Oak Haven who'd been afraid to speak up because men like Greg and Dawson held all the power. She wrote about justice and accountability and why both mattered. When she finished, it was 3 a.m. and her eyes burned with exhaustion, but the statement felt right. True. Powerful. She slept for 4 hours and woke to her alarm feeling hollow but determined. Diane met her at the courthouse steps. She was younger than Clara expected, maybe 40, with sharp eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor. You ready for this? As ready as I'll ever be. Remember, you're not on trial. You're telling your truth. Don't let their attorneys intimidate you. Just speak from the heart. The courtroom was smaller than Clara expected. Greg sat at the defense table looking diminished somehow, like he'd shrunk since she'd last seen him. He wouldn't meet her eyes. Sheriff Dawson sat beside him, his face red and angry. The judge, a woman in her 60s with steel gray hair and kind but firm eyes, called the hearing to order. We're here for sentencing in the matter of the United States versus Gregory Miller and Robert Dawson. But first, I understand we have victim impact statements. Ms. Bennett. Clara stood on shaking legs and walked to the podium. She unfolded her statement and looked up at the judge, then at Greg, then at the packed gallery where Jim and his men sat in the back row, Sarah and Lisa and Jennifer in the middle, Mrs. Chen and Patricia and Rachel near the front. She took a breath and began to read. Her voice shook at first, but grew stronger as she spoke. She told about the $33, about Lily's inhaler, about being fired for telling the truth, about the falsified records and the lies that had nearly destroyed her. Greg Miller didn't just steal money, Clara said, her voice clear and firm now. He stole dignity. He stole hope. He made people feel small and powerless because it served his interests. And when someone finally stood up to him, he tried to destroy them. She looked directly at Greg, forcing him to meet her eyes. But he failed, Because the truth is stronger than lies. Because community is stronger than corruption. Because people who've been knocked down can get back up, especially when others reach down to help them. She folded her statement. Your Honor, I'm not asking for revenge. I'm asking for accountability. I'm asking that my story and the stories of every woman Greg Miller hurt matter as much as his excuses and justifications. I'm asking for justice. The courtroom was silent as Clara walked back to her seat. Diane squeezed her hand. Perfect. You did perfect. 3 other women gave statements. Lisa Jennifer and a former waitress Clara had never met who'd been fired 6 years ago for reporting sexual harassment. Each story built on the last painting, a picture of systematic abuse and exploitation. When they finished, the judge looked at Greg and Dawson with an expression that could have frozen fire. Gentlemen, I've been on this bench for 23 years. I've seen a lot of criminals, heard a lot of excuses. But what strikes me about this case is the casual cruelty, the way you treated vulnerable people as disposable, the way you used your power to crush anyone who challenged you. She consulted her notes. Mr. Miller, you have been convicted of fraud, money laundering, conspiracy, and filing false police reports. The sentencing guidelines suggest 6 to 8 years. I'm giving you 10. Maybe in that time you'll develop the empathy and conscience you so clearly lack. Greg's face went white. His attorney started to object, but the judge cut him off. Mr. Dawson, as a law enforcement officer, you had a duty to protect the community. Instead, you enabled criminal activity for personal gain. You get 8 years. Both of you will serve your sentences in federal prison. Both of you will be required to pay full restitution to your victims. And both of you will carry the felony convictions for the rest of your lives. She brought down the gavel. This court is adjourned. Clara sat frozen as Greg and Dawson were led away in handcuffs. It was over. Actually over. They were going to prison. Justice had actually happened. She started crying and couldn't stop. Diane hugged her. Sarah hugged her. Jim came down from the gallery and wrapped her in a bear hug that lifted her off the ground. You did it, he said. You actually did it. We did it? Clara corrected. All of us together. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed. Monica Richardson was there with her camera crew. Other journalists Clara didn't recognize shouted questions. She looked at Diane, who nodded encouragingly. Ms. Bennett, how do you feel about the sentencing? Monica asked. Clara wiped her eyes and found her voice. I feel like justice was served. Not just for me, but for every person who's been made to feel powerless by someone with authority. This shows that standing up matters, that truth matters, that we don't have to accept corruption and abuse as just the way things are. What's next for you? I'm going to keep running the 33 Diner, keep building something good, keep proving that people can overcome even the worst circumstances if they refuse to give up and if others are willing to help. Do you have a message for other people in similar situations? Clara thought about that, about everyone out there feeling trapped and hopeless and alone. Yes, your voice matters. Your truth matters. It might feel like the powerful people always win, but they don't. Not if you're brave enough to stand up and smart enough to find your people. There are more good people in this world than bad. You just have to be willing to reach out and let them help you. The interview wrapped, and Clara drove back to Oak Haven feeling lighter than she had in months. The weight she'd been carrying, the fear, the anger, the need for validation, it had all lifted. She'd told her truth. She'd been heard. Justice had been served. Now she could just live. The diner was busy when she arrived, Sarah managing the floor with easy competence. Clara slipped into the kitchen to check on things and found Jennifer experimenting with a new pie recipe. How'd it go? Jennifer asked. 10 years for Greg, 8 for Dawson. Jennifer let out a whoop that made the whole kitchen turn. That's amazing. That's Clara. That's everything we hoped for. Word spread through the diner. Customers who'd been following the story applauded. Someone started a chant of Clara's name that made her cheeks burn with embarrassment and pride. That night after closing, Clara sat in her office doing paperwork and thinking about how far she'd come. 6 months ago, she'd been standing in the same building, different office, but same space getting fired for telling the truth. Now she owned the place. Now she was building something that mattered. Her phone rang, an unknown number, but she answered anyway. Ms. Bennett, this is Catherine Morrow from the National Small Business Association. I'm calling because we'd like to feature you in our annual publication, highlighting businesses that are making a difference in their communities. Would you be interested? Clara blinked. Yes, absolutely. Thank you. Wonderful. We'll be in touch with details. And Ms. Bennett, what you've done here is truly inspiring. You should be very proud. After she hung up, Clara sat there shaking her head. National recognition. Her little diner in Oak Haven was getting national attention. It felt surreal, but also earned. She'd fought for this, bled for this, refused to give up even when giving up would have been so much easier. She closed up the office and drove home to her trailer. She'd been looking at houses, actual houses with yards and multiple bedrooms, but she wasn't quite ready to leave Starview yet. This place had been her rock bottom and her launching pad. She wasn't ready to say goodbye. Mrs. Chen was sitting on her porch knitting as usual. She waved as Clara pulled in. "Big day," Mrs. Chen called out. "The biggest?" Clara agreed. "You know what you should do? You should take that daughter of yours on a vacation. You've been working so hard. You both deserve a break." Clara thought about that. When was the last time she'd taken Lily anywhere? When was the last time they'd done anything just for fun? "You know what? You're right. Maybe during Lily's winter break. We'll go somewhere, see something new." "Good. You've earned it, dear. You've earned everything good that's coming your way." Inside the trailer, Clara found Lily asleep on the couch, homework scattered around her. She cleaned up the papers, carried her daughter to bed, tucked her in with a kiss. "Love you, baby girl," she whispered. Lily stirred slightly. "Love you too, Mama. Did the bad man go to jail?" "Yes, sweetheart, he did." "Good, that's fair." Clara smiled. "Yeah, it really is." She went to her own room and pulled out the patch Jim had given her months ago. Honorary member. Family. She traced the embroidery with her finger, thinking about how much her definition of family had expanded. Family was Jim and his brothers showing up when she needed them most. Family was Sarah risking her job to find the truth. Family was Mrs. Chen watching Lily and Rachel offering her a job, and Patricia believing in her business plan. Family was Detective Chen doing his job honestly, and Agent Walsh fighting for justice and Diane taking her case pro bono. Family was everyone who'd reached out a hand when Claire was drowning and refused to let go until she could stand on her own. She'd spent so long thinking she was alone, but she'd never been alone. The help had been there all along. She just needed to be brave enough to accept it. Over the next few months, life settled into a rhythm that felt almost impossibly normal. The diner thrived. Clara hired more staff, expanded the menu, even started looking into opening a second location. She moved out of the trailer and into a small house with a yard where Lily could play. She paid off her debts, built up her savings, started planning for a future that looked bright instead of desperate. Jim and his charter came through Oak Haven once a month like clockwork, always stopping at the 33 for a meal and to check in. It became a tradition. The first Saturday of every month, dozens of motorcycles would roll into town, and the whole community would come out to eat and celebrate and remember how standing together had changed everything. 1 year after that first desperate day when Clara had only $33 to her name, the diner threw an anniversary party. The whole town showed up. Monica Richardson did a special report. The mayor declared it Clara Bennett Day in Oak Haven. Clara stood behind the counter of her diner, and looked out at the faces. Some she'd known for years. Some were new. All of them were here because they believed in what this place represented. She thought about making a speech but decided against it. Everything that needed to be said had been said. Everything that needed to be proven had been proven. Instead, she just got back to work. Serving coffee, taking orders, treating every customer with the respect and dignity she'd once been denied. Because that's what the 33 Diner was really about. Not revenge, not even justice really. It was about proving that kindness could be profitable, that integrity could succeed, that good people didn't have to finish last. It was about showing that the world could be better if enough people decided to make it so. As the sun set on that anniversary day, Clara stood outside watching the last customers leave. Jim's motorcycle was still parked out front. He came out of the diner holding 2 cups of coffee and handed her one. "Hell of a year," he said. "Hell of a year," Clara agreed. They stood there in comfortable silence, watching the sky turn orange and purple. Somewhere in the distance, she could hear Lily playing with friends in the park across the street. Happy sounds, free sounds. "You ever regret it?" Jim asked. "Standing up that day, starting all this?" Clara thought about the fear, the struggle, the moments when she'd been sure everything would fall apart. She thought about the peat and the risk and all the ways it could have gone wrong. Then she thought about Lily breathing easy, about owning her own business, about having a community that valued her, about sleeping at night without the crushing weight of desperation. Not for a second, she said. Jim nodded. Good, because you changed more than just your own life, Clara. You changed this whole town, showed people what courage looks like. That's a legacy worth building. Clara smiled. I didn't do it alone. No, but you did it first. That's what counts. He finished his coffee, got on his bike, and rode off into the sunset with that familiar rumble that still made Clara think of hope and help arriving when she needed it most. She went back inside her diner, locked up for the night, and headed home to her daughter, and her house, and her life that she'd fought so hard to build. And every step of the way, she remembered that it had all started with $33, a desperate choice, and the courage to stand up when staying silent would have been easier. Sometimes the smallest acts of bravery led to the biggest changes. Sometimes telling the truth cost everything, but returned it tenfold. Sometimes the angels who saved you rode motorcycles and wore leather and scared everyone except the people who actually needed help. And sometimes, just sometimes, the broken world put itself back together in ways more beautiful than anyone could have imagined. One act of courage, one moment of kindness, one person standing up at a time.